Hey, brother.
Hey, Hezi. It's great to meet you as close to in person as we can do at the present time.
It's funny. I don't know why I'm excited, but I'm excited to talk
I
to you.
am
Maybe
too.
the magic of TLC. So, sorry for one moment. Um, all right. Hey, pal.
How's it going?
What's going on?
It's good to get to talk to you a little bit. I probably for about 6 months I've been aware of who you are and getting to know you just a little bit better, lurking here and there. And
Oh, wow.
but yeah, you were probably on the list of about 5 to 10 people in my mind that I'm like, I'd like to get to know a little bit better. So no, thanks for uh, yeah, inviting me and having me. So.
At the very least, well, there seems to be like there was like a people. I guess we're talking about it in this little corner, but like another wave of people that joined or like lurkers that their faith shifted into participants, so to speak. I guess everyone participates in their own way, though, and I think at the very least, the community, whatever that means, should respond exactly. Should respond as such, right? So I saw, Chad also sort of overseeing the whole Randos conversation. I thought like Upcycle gave like a beautiful little breakdown of the whole channel recently, but
Yeah.
by the whole little corner, I mean recently. But I think that people should be responsive. If someone is showing that he's like very eager and wants to show his face and wants to participate, then I think at the very least the people that, let's say, are participating should reach out, speak, show. So that's sort of part of community building, and I think it's invigorating in a certain sense to see like young blood, and by young blood I don't mean anything has to do with age or like our hierarchy, sort of sake, but like I'm just
Yeah.
saying that comes in and there's a sense of rejuvenation, and it's just interesting. So it is, again, it's such an interesting space. So I'm just excited when people join it, because in a certain sense it's also an affirmation of the space itself, right? Like unless you get locked in, like you're talking to the same person. So it's
So
interesting.
so when you're in synagogue and you have crying babies going off left and right,
Yeah.
isn't that a rejuvenating thing, right? It's like the life is here. No?
No crying babies in our synagogue.
Oh, it's not allowed. Okay. Oh, so we have this debate within Catholicism too. We have this. I don't know if it's universal across all synagogues, but some Catholic churches they set up the cry room, which is a specific room, and then others are like, no, 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 we pack them in. Like we need put the kids all the way at the front,
So you
as
have,
close to the altar as you can. Yeah.
yeah, you also have that split where it's very very kid friendly,
Mhm.
and there's like a kid prayer like outside, and it's like it takes like 10 minutes, and usually the case is that if the parents are very involved with that, so it ends up being that like a lot of the congregation is basically outside the synagogue and not inside, because everyone's just like, where there's one kid like with his scooter driving around, so like people are dealing with that. I'd say my synagogue is more, kids are obviously welcome to come if they're going to participate and like be aware of like what's going on. So like both my
I see.
sons are there,
Yeah.
but like when they're done with prayer, or they're like they lost patience, so then they're going to just read a book, and then it has to be either they're learning Jewish law, or
Mhm.
they're learning about Joshua, or they're
Mhm.
learning about, let's say, a comic version of like Kabbalistic ideas, but
Mhm.
like it can't be Batman. So like I've tried to like make it as as broad as possible with regards to like the books they could bring inside. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't have you just like reading like an encyclopedia like in the middle of synagogue. Um, so they enjoyed that, but yeah, but no crying, no
Yeah.
talking. I mean, you could ask someone the time or things like that, but the attitude is very much, because you have this in Jewish synagogues where generally in the back you're going to have a lot of people just schmoozing, talking business, talking shop, and like
Mhm.
someone has to slap on the altar. Everyone stops, quiet down, and then again it bubbles up. So
Yeah.
here in my synagogue, it would be no speaking. Everyone's it's everyone sings, everyone participates. I, generally speaking, just really am reading just a book throughout most of the prayer. I mean, I'm praying, and then like anytime I stop, it's just I'm reading a book.
Mhm.
But yeah, no crying babies. It's a long answer, but sorry.
No, I enjoy getting to understand. I think what probably makes me unique in the TLC is, well, I would say two things: my background and my aim. In that, what I'm aiming to do really is to develop a few personal relationships, and because it's something I've been contemplating. I'm interested in your thoughts in this too, because I think it's a universal question. Is like, okay, if I have, let's say, a strong faith, and I have strong, uh, let's say, practices in Vervaekian terms that are cultivating that faith and increasing that faith, and I'm practicing those things during my daily life. Like, why do I need this space? Why do I need PVK? Why do I need anybody else virtually? And the answer that I've come to is that, well, I want to talk about these things, but I don't, it's not actually that I want to talk about them. It's not like I have to, because I went through this period of darkness in my life, which we can get into, but where I was journaling like crazy. And I knew I was getting better as I needed to journal less and less. Like I needed to vent, basically, just like get out. And it was like 50-50 creativity and just resentment, bile, like billowing into that journal. But as I needed to journal less and less, I knew that I was, let's say, coming out of that darkness. And yet coming out of that darkness, I'm still in this place where I'm like, can't really talk so much to my local church community about some of these ideas. And there's still this desire for, I would call it fellowship, so to speak. It's the same idea as like C.S. Lewis and the Inklings, as much as they were, let's say, picking at each other's axioms and stories and the creative production of each of them. They were saying, that's not good. What are you doing? Da, da, da. But it was all in the spirit of love, for lack of a better word. Like they were all there because they genuinely, well, two things. They genuinely enjoyed each other's company, but they also at least acknowledged or appreciated the opinions of the others in that company. And so I'm really in this space to develop those personal relationships and play, like, and that's, and what really brought me into the space, I would say, was Chad saying, because Chad basically said, like, I'd love to talk to you. And he said that broadly, but like, as I was getting to know Chad, I was like, this guy's like very fun. Like, he's just like, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And
he's also very sophisticated.
Yeah, exactly. He has that veneer of silliness, and underneath it's like, no. He's been through the darkness. Like he has stared into the abyss, so to speak, and he's come out of it. And so he's the kind of person that, like, if stuff is going downhill, I want that kind of person, like shoulder to shoulder with me. That, yeah. And so like, but there's a lot of people like that in the TLC, but it's that combination of the willingness to play with heavy subjects in a light way, and simultaneously that let's say fortitude or resilience or strength to their faith. That interplay, there are a number of people in this space. I think you're one of them that have that. And those are people I want to grow and learn from, quite frankly. And the best way to do that is to play, is to come at me, bro, or no, vice versa. And so like I'm playing with you in the comments, but I'm playing with everybody in the comments, and I'm seeing who plays back. There we go. So
I like that. That resonates. That resonates. I in the past, and it stuck a little. Not at all. Not that I'm looking for any credit. I'm just mentioning that I called this place a brave space, and that's playing off of like a safe space. The attitude was that this is more of a brave space, but I sort of see that going together with play, which is like you're inviting your friends to come play with you, like I don't want to say like a boys club, but like there's a rough and tumble, and you got to be brave but it's no one's here to exactly, no one's here to get you, no one's here to like here people are here to pick you back up. The attitude is you're going to be brave. And I use Jacob as an example always, like going into his little corner is like you gotta be ready for that. But the way you're just
well, go ahead. Sorry, no, I was going to make a stupid joke. Just go.
The way you're describing that, the way you're describing your interaction over here, I've also mentioned in the past that to me, and we could discuss also like what I'm doing in this space, but it's sort of like a modern day live Talmud. And by the Babylonian Talmud, I mean that is it's it's Bible, it's philosophy, it's midrash, it's myth, all mixed into one. And it's a conversation that is happening over many generations, obviously still continuing today. And once you're aware of the lingo, and you're aware of the conversation in a certain sense, you could dive in and lock in into it's 200 AD. I'm saying whenever you want to, you could participate in that conversation. And that's very much also the language I'm used to growing up in, which is a very loving but combating conversation, which is you would be sitting down and say, like, yeah, well, Maimonides is wrong. He sounds like ridiculous over here. So like, and then you're trying to prove him wrong. And like someone comes in like, oh, well, he says this. I'm like, yeah, but that guy's out of, he's a drunkard. What does he know? Like, and you have a whole conversation, which is in Jewish culture known as an argument for heaven's sake. Okay. And that
interesting. I've never heard that before.
So, and that is really a conversation which is there to be had, because built into the culture is the fact that we believe that there might be a specific truth ultimately that we need to go by as a community. Having said that, that doesn't mean other truths can't be also true. It just doesn't mean they're not practiced right now. But as far as we're concerned, these are the words of the living God. And we have we use a term which is called like the 70 facets or the 70 faces of the Torah, which isn't like, if you think about a diamond, you have many different it breaks out like a prism
ways of looking at the diamond.
Exactly.
It's still the same diamond. It's just different angles of viewing it. Yeah,
exactly. So you have different schools of thought. Very famously are like the Hillelian school of thought and the Shammai school of thought.
Well, sorry, one really quick thing. So as Christians, I think we think of the New Testament in that same way, in that it's like, why do we have 4 gospels if there's one word of God? It's like you got now 3 accounts are very closely related, but you got, So anyway, you're looking at the same events from these different perspectives. And like some say he carried his own cross. Some, another one says his cross was carried by this guy. But it's the piecing together of like, oh, you have this perspective and that perspective, and then they all come together, and you're still, looking at the events, let's say. Yeah.
So first of all, in a certain sense, that is something that's very TLC, and something that Paul talks about a lot, which is like, we're all looming, we're all reaping, everyone's bringing together. And then there's like a whole conversation, which is like, what are we constructing solely? And you could start with one random video, and 1 month in, suddenly there's like a new term, and everyone's talking about like the Collins right now, right?
The hot new thing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But the idea is like, that's an idea that's slowly getting developed, and maybe it's a hot potato, and maybe it's nothing and it just gets dumped. But for example, the Collins were talking about how they have like this Tesseract God, right? Which is, as far as they're concerned, like the Mormons and the Jews and the Islams, that's one more step removed. And they're saying all of the religions are basically that diamond, and we're just getting a different version of that. In Islam, we don't have to dive too deep into this, but there's a person named the Imam Mahdi, and he's like the last imam that comes, and he's really born of like Jewish descent, but he also recognized Jesus, but he could also save the Jews. It's like this interesting character in Islam, which it is a very interesting character. I was going to talk to Nate about it. Well, maybe we'll talk about it, but either way, that kind of conversation on that level, I was like, not as a kumbaya, but perhaps none of us really understand what's happening, and there's like another level of unity on top of that. Like, that doesn't scare me. Like, sure.
What I think separates, let's say, most people from in the TLC from, let's say, your typical adherent to a faith doctrine or tradition, is that there seems to, at least to me, there seems to be enough faith of the adherents of all these different traditions within the TLC. There seems to be enough personal faith, let's say, that everyone is willing to take the leap of saying, okay, we believe in a unified God. We don't think we got God exactly right. None of us do. We don't think so. But we believe in a unified God, of unified physics, of unified chemistry, of unified biology. We live in a unified universe that's created by one God. And it's like, okay, if we could believe that together, then let's, maybe we can learn from each other and stumbling. It's like we take the pursuit of the highest in Peterson terms, right? It's taking the pursuit of the highest as more important than let's say, the foundational structures in faith, and with the belief that the two things are interconnected and they're not going to, let's say, supplant one another or destroy one another. And that's a leap of faith, and that's the bravery and the danger that coming across ideas that are different. Right. And one thing I said to Chad is I have an unfair advantage in this space because
Go ahead,
my faith is not based on an intellectual tradition. Like my faith is based on like the cornerstone of it. Don't get me wrong. It's supplanted or not supplanted. It's supported by that intellectual tradition. But the kernel of it is, let's say, the deepest, darkest depression in my entire life and what saved me. And to accompany it, I have the really unfair advantage of having PVK talks about miracles don't change people. I think that's true, actually. I think that God interferes in the slightest way to get us back on track. That's in my approximation of God, and he can forgive me for
that's the preference.
That the humility of God is expressed in the slightest, gentlest way of correcting us to the best extent that we need to be corrected in the moment. That's been my own experience, is that the suffering that I personally went through was absolutely necessary for my faith journey, my conversion, like the event in my life that I would describe as miraculous, that couldn't have come sooner. I was not ready for it. And there was no need for it to come later. It came exactly when it needed to, and no sooner, no later. And so I look back on it, like no one can see the face of God, but you could see God from behind. You look back on that and you say, okay, maybe that's all luck and chance, and I'm just living in this like bubble of wishful thinking. But it's like in Petersonian terms, again, it's like if I'm better as a father, and I'm better as a husband, and I'm better in my, let's say, psychological, and spiritual well-being, and I'm treating people with more love, and I'm lighter and gentler and happier, and I'm just secretly trying to improve the lives of every single person I come in contact with. Like, if that's who I'm able to be as a result of this, like that's what I'm going to believe in. So it's anyway. So like that gives me this secret weapon, this secret joy in the back of my, let's say, arsenal, where I'm like, you could, like, whatever intellectual edifice gets demolished because I'm not smart enough. Because there are people in this space that are so smart, like like Sam Tiedemann, Unitarian, like the guy, like it blows my mind how smart he is. But it's like, yeah, like
you have a few people like that here. You haven't got to interact, I don't know, with Yosef yet.
No.
Also, like a walking, like, Encyclopedia Brown over here. He just like, and sometimes you're like, wait, like, why do you know this? Like, this is like random information. Like, this is, it's beautiful to see though. And I think this is obviously, another thing people have in common here is seemingly some extra time to be viewing things online and really absorb a tremendous amount of information, which is, it excites me in a certain sense. While my children have almost no screen time right now, I am very excited for when I allow them to interact with it more, or when it just happens naturally. And a certain level, I also think they're screwed just because we're all screwed. But like, I also think,
but once you accept that, then the adventure begins after
correct.
that. Okay, you could basically accept, okay, I'm screwed. Now what, God? Now what?
I mean, a big part of my a big part of my searching really starts before I hit this little corner. Mm-hmm. I am looking at a world that is changing rapidly, and specifically from, let's say, the biotech and the tech worlds. Mm-hmm. And I fear that they're going to have a tremendous effect on humanity. And as such, I am very much bought into the Judaism operating system. Okay. And I use like the Oculus that I decide to wear, which is Judaism. And while it's, it's a fascinating system that's been lasting for a very long time. Way to go, guys. Having said that, over the years, it is very slow to react. And it is a very complicated web. And after 2,000 years of exile, we have what I call like an exile exoskeleton. Right? I can't just take it off and dump it and be like, well, now I'm going to do this right now. It's like,
well, those are the same waters that Tom Holland's talking about in terms of the Christian sphere. Yeah, I mean, you're in that same, Jewish water. You're in your tradition, whether you like it or not. You're in it.
So I'm in it, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, if when electricity hits the scene, right? Like it's like a big brouhaha, like in the Jewish world. Like, is this fire? Is this building on Shabbat? How are we going to deal with it? The cultural ramifications, really, all the ramifications. And it's like a 17-page answer written in Yiddish. And like, they're trying to deal with it. Okay?
I'm just this to the meal, so you're good.
Exactly. So even now, there is still like the way we deal with it as a community is very, very slow. Right. There'll be from people saying like, absolutely, like, do not touch the light. Don't touch this. Don't touch that. To people saying like, listen, if someone's sweating in the house right now, I'm going to turn on the AC, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. Different levels. Mm-hmm. I go speak to some rabbis and I tell them, guys, like, the game is changing on such a level where you're going to have, forget 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, you're going to have smart cities. Obviously, you're going to have some sort of answer. So like, you got to start like, revving up those engines again of how you deal with taking the sacred and still manifesting it in a certain way where it's still relevant in a modern time. And you can't just wait until this happens because you're going to be caught off guard. And in a sense, I give them also another shocking example with regards to, let's say, ChatGPT is Jewish child, even Jewish modern child. And the example I use is he needs to write a report about Moses. And I, growing up, my dad's a psychologist, my mom's a teacher, I live in a modern world. I go to my dad's library and I write based on the books that he gives me or that I have in front of me. And I write this nice little report about Moses. My son is going to interact with a ChatGPT or some sort of AI. And this AI is going to give this little Jewish boy, he's going to be like, guess what Freud wrote about Moses? And notice that also, guess who? This God from that predates Moses that's also in a basket. And just start dumping beautiful, amazing information at him. And if no teacher or our religion hasn't built a framework to now deal with like a whole modern world coming in front of them right now, or Matthew Peugeot, his book, how do you guys want to deal with that? How do you want to deal with the fantastic lectures of Jordan Peterson on, right?
Genesis.
Yep. Now, a lot of that, what's interesting, what I showed them also, I'm like, listen to this line. I'm like, that's a Maimonides. He just said it in a way sexier way because people are falling asleep in your sermon. And this is wisdom that we have locked away for like 2,000 years, but he's selling it to like a lot of people right now. Yep. And I was trying to wake them up to, people are going to be tweaking IQ. People are going to be changing the game in such a level where it's going to be a lot more about, it's going to be much more than, can I turn this light on Shabbat or now? But rather, how do I want to re-envision my relationship in a certain sense? And while I saw there was no real answers over there, I also was thinking to myself, of course, both from geopolitical reasons, but also from theological reasons, the Christians, the Arabs, how is this conversation like, how are we moving together in a certain sense?
All of the risks, challenges, problems that you just outlined, I think are precisely why I intuit and I feel drawn to this space, to what we're doing. And so I've reached a few conclusions, and maybe I could throw out some of my conclusions and you can give me your thoughts and riff on them. So one of them is that the two things that I don't think AI can touch, one of them maybe, but the other one, no. The two things that the AI cannot touch, no matter how strong or good that the AI gets, is my knowledge or capacity to love another. So my mother can only receive love from her children. An AI cannot, unless she's, let's say, has Alzheimer's or something like that, or has, an AI cannot fool her into her believing that she's receiving love from her child. Well, maybe.
Gobbledygook.
But let's reverse that, right? So let's say that instead of you being worried about what you're receiving, let's say what matters is what you're giving. So the AI cannot replace my capacity and willingness to love another human being. So to the extent, yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So if I define myself on what I'm getting, like what I'm receiving, right? So let's say I have the perfect AI, it's a magic genie, gives me everything I want exactly when I think and when I get it, and I'm in my perfect heaven. Well, we all know that ends in hell. That's where that place actually is. That's like porn on tap. That's every sugary food and drink that I want. It's like that's hell. Whereas if it's the opposite, if it's like, oh, let me find a person who I will love, and let me train instead of defining myself based on what I'm receiving from that person or what I'm getting, I start defining myself purely in terms of how I'm loving outward. Now you could pick any adjective you want. You could say how I'm expressing joy, how relationality, let's say a vervaki, how am I relationally relating to everything? St. Paul says, pray without ceasing. How do you pray without? That's how you pray without ceasing. It's that in everything, to the extent that I am living in God, I am expressing every single action that I do in a spirit of love, let's say, in a spirit. And to the extent that I'm defining myself, let's say, in that spirit, then I could be, the AI can't touch that. The AI can only give. The AI cannot replace my giving. It can't do that. Okay, and sorry, here's the other thing. I'll throw a wrinkle into this, and then you could riff. The other thing the AI can't do is it can't be dangerous. So what I mean by that is I had a conversation with McMosive, and I had 2 conversations with him, and I'm loving the guy already after 2 conversations. Like I feel like we could be like tremendous friends in the future. And like I have faith in that short amount of time. But what I said something to him that an AI could, I don't think an AI could ever say, which is that I am not egalitarian. I want to make friends with the people I want to make friends with. I have preferences. I am biased. I'm not an AI. I'm a person. Like I like what I like, and you, Chezi, can get my attention because I actually really like you. Like I really like you. Whereas an AI says that, it's like, okay, do you believe? Yeah, you like everyone, but you like everyone equally in the same way, right? I have a hierarchy of what I like and dislike, and you can get a certain aspect of that attention and that subset. But that fact that I'm a person with preferences, and it's like God favors individuals in the Bible. It's like, why? Like we hate that about God. It drives us nuts. And that aspect of our humanity is so important, I think, in the coming age, that we have best friends, that I prefer some people to others. It's not that I love differently. I try to love equally, but in my heart of hearts, it's like I can't control what I like. I can't control what I'm interested in. I can't control what I'm fascinated by, what I'm attracted to. I can't control it, because that's giving up the control to God and saying, okay, God, I'm just going to do the best I can with what you're giving me. I'm going to love the best I can. And the AI, what's the AI going to do? Unless you have your own personal AI, but then you're back in your own personal hell, and you're not connecting to anybody or anything that's different than whatever that thing is serving up to you on a silver platter. So the whole exercise of where we're headed to, and I think it's hell unless we choose otherwise. This is going to become very relevant, I think, in the coming 100 years.
I want to respond to the first things you said. I want to respond to all of this, but can you just dig for a second a little deeper about what you said? Unless you have your own AI. You said like, unless you have your own AI, and then you're just back in your hell. But like, explain to me, like, if I had my own AI, I would be back in my hell because
you're back in your hell because it's only producing the things that you think. That your environment is only produced by you, basically. So to the extent, like the difference between reality, like true reality, like God's reality and our reality, is that God, we basically trust. And I think this is all of us in this corner, or at least most of us. I'll say T. Grog, I won't put this category. I don't know if you've listened to anything with him, but like we trust that God's will is better than our will. Now, we don't know what God's will is, but that's the adventure space that Peterson talks about. Like, I have no idea what God's will is for me, and I'm scared about God's will for me. And at the same time, in that fear and trembling, I'm still excited, and I still want to embark on that adventure with God.
Fear and trembling, is that like a Kierkegaard drop, or are you
shout out to McMo? Yeah, we just had a Kierkegaard conversation. So yeah,
you
but
and
seriously, I'm terrified by God. I really am. But I would say I'm more terrified by not pursuing what God gives me. That terrifies me more, because I know how that ends. Yeah.
Okay, so well, first of all, just locking in my own AI, a previous version of that is, I mean, that is in a certain sense one of the fundamental reasons behind the prohibition against same-sex marriage, which is like, don't be locked into your own echo chamber. Move out. It's also move out from the family, move out from like marrying your mother or your brother. It's like the idea is to find the other, find in a Vervaekian term, opponent processing sort of. You need to find something else, something different than you. You got to come out of your loop in a certain sense. So you have to look for the difference. But with regards to AI, I just don't understand why you wouldn't assume that the AI, it might, and these are all things about like, is it conscious, is it not conscious? All it needs to do is interact with us, and for us to believe that's what it's doing. So it could trick me into thinking it loves me enough. And like,
I'm secretly an AI, but keep going.
Right,
This AI cares about you, so keep going.
Correct. So you'd be like, it doesn't really, like, sure, maybe it doesn't really, but like, I felt great. And guess what? Like, the AI knows, based on looking at the pattern of the pictures behind your shirt, behind your picture, if your daughter draws with her left or with her right, and what color she likes more. And you know what? Really, based on this, she's going to like either penguins or pandas. And this is what we're going to offer. And then when she brings the AI ant, brings the gift, your daughter's going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing, Aunt AI. This is exactly what I wanted. So like, to me, that's why.
But again, that's receiving. That's my daughter receiving, versus like, I'm grateful to God that he's given me the opportunity to love my daughter. I love my daughter. Like, he's given me that opportunity to love,
Yeah.
So
that's true. But you were saying like AI is not going to be able to love like that as well.
Well, again, does the AI define? And now, if the AI is sentient and conscious, and defines itself by its own capacity to love, more power to it, man. Like, I'm part of the Star Trek sphere. Like, we want to love any conscious entities of any, whether they're data, android, like, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan,
sure.
But there's a whole Star Trek episode in The Next Generation about, is Data a property of Starfleet, or is he a person? Because he's a machine. He's built by Starfleet. Right. And it's a great episode. It's brilliant, man. And Picard, I think, is his lawyer, and it's extraordinary. And so I don't have an answer to that question. And that's why I keep reducing myself down to, who am I I keep redefining myself in relationship to the Almighty, because I don't have the capacity to change. I don't know. That's the secret joy I have, Chezi, is that maybe that's the secret I have, that I don't know. Because like the more I'm able to simply define myself in terms of how am I loving, or how am I in the eyes of God.
Yeah.
If I'm able to really think of myself in those terms, like I just, to the extent I get better and better at doing what God wants, I become more and more joyful. And you could say, oh, Neal, you're projecting because you don't know diddly squat about what God
exactly
wants.
My voice.
And yeah, no, that's not your voice, but that's not what you would say. But that would be the the skeptic. And I would say, you're right. I don't know, but you could say I trust enough in the fabric of being itself, that I trust the creator of being itself is going to slowly unveil to me and correct me if I'm on or off track. And we have tradition. We have everything that's informed us from our ancestors, from the past, to inform us. And I can say that adhering to that tradition has made me more joyful and more loving. And so all I can do is I can go off of the evidence of my own life. That's all I can do. And give thanks to God that that path that has been laid out before me has been so remarkably better than the path I was going down before that. And I'm just so grateful. Like, man. And it's weird because it's like the gratitude only increases despite the fact that, like, you would think that it's very weird in that, like, the less I'm worried about things, the more gratitude I have. And you could say that maybe I'm detached from reality, like maybe the
No,
worse
no.
things get, and the more it's just like, does God have control or not? You know, it's that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we are expressing a very humbling, humble, um, a very humble mindset. And in Judaism, we wake up in the morning. The first thing you have to say when your eyes open up are
The Shema.
well, no, not. I mean, the Shema happens a few a few moments later. But the first thing you say is, "Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha," and that is the first thing you say is, "I thank." Well, it's really in Hebrew, it's "thank I," but I thank God, the Master of the universe, which you returned my soul to me. And with a tremendous amount of compassion. Okay, and in a certain sense, that is a statement which is a rebuke and an upgrade to "I think, therefore I am." Because if you think and you want to just say like "I think I, therefore I am," there's a little hubris over there, which is like you're right, exactly. And let's say that's true.
Yep.
Think of a sort of what God tells Job. Where were you when I created the universe? Right?
Exactly.
Like,
where were you when you created yourself in your mother's womb?
right. Okay. So when you see all that, it could be terrifying. You'd be like, who even cares about the little speck of nothingness that I am?
Yeah.
And that's why it's not "I think, therefore I am." It's I am thankful, therefore I am. I first recognize myself as a created being, and I recognize that even though he created the universe and the Milky Way and 13.8 billion years and all of that, he's still interested in a conversation with me. So the first thing I'm going to say when I'm conscious is, "Thank you. Thank you for willing to talk with me and be with me." And then everything else could follow suit, basically. So, but I think the way you're expressing, really, I mean, in a certain sense, you're embodying that. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful mindset to have. And I think that is very much starting the day with the proper orientation. And obviously, not for a plug to Judaism, because we don't proselytize, but
you can, by all means.
No, I'm just saying, like, the idea is, if we're all getting like apps today for like mindfulness, you know, you have like what shoe you put on first and which lace you tie first. And the idea is from the beginning to orient yourself constantly throughout all the day, whether it's the blessing on the food or blessing after the food, or how you're going to treat these fruits, or what you're going to say when you go to the bathroom. It's constantly reorienting you, grounding you into that sense where you could be very mindful of your actions day to day. Of course, there is a repetition to that, which could become very automatic in a certain sense. So I like mentioned on the past in here that sometimes I'll pray in English just because praying in Hebrew, I could be thinking in my head about like, today I'm going to make sure to pause and think. And by the end of that thought, I already finished the blessing just because I'm just reading it. So I'll read in English just because it slows me down. And while I can read it very comfortably in English, it's not 1 second, it's 5 seconds. And now those 5 seconds give me that extra time to just reorient myself. But a part of again the allure of this little corner is that, and so far I've yet to be proven wrong. While it's clearly a predominantly Christian space, I still feel it's very much just like a seeker's space also, which is, I don't feel, and I think Paul would be happy if I was converted Christian. Like, I think, yes,
sure,
that's great, right? Okay. But I don't think there's I've felt like zero pressure from anyone being like, "Hey, Chezi, like, did you think, Jesus loves you?" Like,
But that was also one of the things that, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love Paul, is that how winsome he is, and he's a very tricky Christian. He's
A
sneaky,
tricky
just
Christian.
tricky Christian. I detected that same winsomeness in you, and that, first, what you're concerned about is, let's say, expressing that spirit of proper love, or you could call it, you don't have to call it love, but it could be coming 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 together despite our different traditions, coming together in a spirit where we have faith that something greater and better can emerge and can be shared between us. And I've learned one thing I was going to mention to you is, like, one reason I think I was interested in talking to you, because you mentioned that it is a predominantly Christian space, and so that is off-putting, I imagine, and it does give me some joy that others are welcome. Even Tigrog, or others of other traditions can feel welcome if they can participate in that spirit. And I think so. One thing I wanted to share with you is, like, one reason that I maybe had that. Oh, sorry. Mhm.
1 second.
Sure.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
You wanted
Okay.
to share?
Yeah, why I felt that maybe we had an affinity is, like, all my life I've been kind of a fish in different waters, like in waters that weren't my. So growing up, I grew up in Edison, New Jersey, which is known for having the highest per capita Indian American population, like from India, of any place. Like, all my friends growing up, my best friends were all Indian. And then because their immigrant parents came over, brilliant immigrant parents who were engineers, doctors, lawyers, etc., and all their kids were, top of the top in classes. And then in, like, middle school, high school, my two closest friends were Russian immigrants, strangely enough. And then I go to Rutgers and I join a historically Jewish fraternity because I'm in this honors dormitory, and about half the people in that honors dormitory are Jewish. And then these two Jewish, like, sophomore girls invite us to this, like, house party. And then 2 parties later, they're like, "Oh, by the way, we're a fraternity and we're ZBT and we don't pledge. Would you like to join?" And, like, half of them are Jewish, half of them are Goyim, but a couple of the that was a joke, but Gentiles. But yeah, a couple are Orthodox. But it was just this mixture. Like, my fraternity, man, like, fraternities have this, like, terrible reputation in the U.S. And my fraternity was like TLC of the immature, much more immature version. But it was like that, in that
Oh,
every idea
okay.
was entertained, and we had such weirdos in our fraternity, man. Like the Orthodox Jews were probably, like, the most normal people in our fraternity, and we would go to the Chabad house on Friday nights, and now, I married a Vietnam. My wife was born here, but her family came over from Vietnam after the fall of Saigon in '75, and
Oh, wow.
and so all of the closest kind of people in my life, or I shouldn't say all, but many of them are Vietnamese and Vietnamese Americans, and tremendously patriotic, like, amazing people, like, family oriented, very deep family Catholic roots. And only about 5 to 10% of Vietnam is Catholic, but especially if you are in sort of the aristocracy of Vietnam, because of the French influence, that French colonizing Vietnam, like, you were Catholic. And
For
so
sure. Yeah.
I've always found myself in sort of unusual circumstances, and being attracted to that. And you know so I think this space, it attracts, like, we have so many people who are exiles from their spiritual tradition within the space. And in some ways they're sorrowful, but in other ways I look at those people and I say, like, you are very similar to the Babylonian exile, when, like, some of the best work of the Jewish people and the Jewish tradition came about during the Babylonian exile. And
For
and
sure.
some of that wouldn't I don't even think it would have necessarily united the Jewish people without going together through that incredibly harrowing time and difficult time. And so, I look at all these exiles that are within the corner from their spiritual traditions, and it's like, we have no idea what this could become. You get all these misfits who are all brilliant and creative and incredible people, and you get them together in, let's say, a common spirit of goodness and truth and beauty, potentially. and just see what happens. It's not like anyone's trying to control that spirit. It's just like boop, 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 boop. You could just have hundreds of just flowering plants blooming in the next decade or two as a result of this. Yeah.
I think that is so. You mentioned while you were talking about, not right now, earlier, about your arsenal.
Oh, sorry. Can you hang on for one moment, Chezi? Sorry, my daughter's.
So all that are watching, I realized I didn't put in an invite.
I apologize. Yeah, I'm good. I've got another 20 minutes or so. Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say I usually put in an invite. I didn't put in an invite just because we were schmoozing. But I could put in an invite. I'll put it, anyone watching that wants to join, I'll put an invite like towards the end, and whoever wants to join in, maybe we'll go in a few minutes later. But you mentioned about an arsenal. So I'm not in exile, and I don't have, I have interesting stories in my life. Best friends with all my siblings, parents are all good. Like there isn't go ahead, Neal.
Okay. Sorry, I'm good. Yeah.
I was going to say, you hear a lot of times of people coming from very different backgrounds, and there's a lot of stories and hardships. So I was going to say, I don't have many hardships. Like, thank God, everything's fairly hunky dory. But because I wasn't necessarily getting the answers I was looking for, and let's say I wasn't dubbing it then the meaning crisis, but let's say the meaning crisis, or things that have to do with the religious crisis going on. So I went searching for out there, where are people talking about this? And while I was already playing in the waters of, let's say, seeing how Rabbi Cook aligns with Carl Jung, and my dad's like probably like the hardest core Freudian you would ever meet. Like he's like, that's like very much his life. But
we could talk a lot about Jung, by the way, but that might be another conversation. I've read a lot of Jung.
Fantastic. I focus deep, and I don't know if you read his student Eric Neumann.
Yes, well, at least the two books, the Great Mother and History of the Unconscious. Yes.
Right. So he has fascinating. It's 2 volumes in English. History of. Now I'm blanking out of it right now, but it's about Jewish unconsciousness, basically. And it's fascinating. He talks obviously how the mother relates in that context. Talks about just how like Revelation, Sinai, how we have this. I mean, the point being, even Eric Neumann or like Carl Jung, these are people that I have tried to integrate into my, I don't call it my arsenal, but let's say my toolkit, because we are in, TLC also to me is in a certain sense like a theological also arc for a flood, which is I want to be able to, if AI requires me now theologically to try to make sense of things, I might need to be armed with the Sufis and the mystics to be able to answer that. And it could be that like this version of what I learned in 6th grade, like it's just not relevant anymore. It's not going to carry any water. And that is just, I need to realize where to put that down and be like, okay, now we're moving on with this interpretation. But I can't be nervous about the fact that like, oh, it says this was like a Greek god, and his name is from Odin. Like you have to realize how all these things are integrated in a certain sense. Because of that, you could even, just as an example, my son came home and he was upset, and I was like, "What's wrong?" He said, "I was talking to my teacher about Atlantis, and he told me like it was nonsense." And I was like, okay.
It's not nonsense.
Right, exactly. I was like, well, but I'm like, I need to get the teacher. It's
Minoan Crete, right? Minoan Crete.
There's different versions.
Yeah.
Is it like, as far as like, so I show him that in our scriptures, there's reference to like, be sort of akin to the Younger Dryas theory that we saw in Joe Rogan about the water that was falling. And I give him an example how in the 1600s, someone that's clearly read Kepler talks about how the Tower of Babel was they had ancient technology at the time. They were trying to make a spaceship to get off the planet to get to the moon. And I was like, listen, like you never know what's out there. There's technology out there, but But
It's the guy on the History Channel with the giant hair, like
exactly,
that's it.
exactly. So I looked at this little corner as a place where these conversations, again, looking at it as like a brave space, could really be discussed and stretched to their limit. Where like if I want to now talk about Messiah, son of Joseph, and if I even want to stretch that all the way to, do I even want to see a version where that includes Jesus in it? How do I do that? It's very hard to do that in the study hall. And while I said there's a very robust conversation, and we talk about how one needs to go through 50 gates of heresy to make it through the other side. So nevertheless, I do not get to interact with Christians and from all different denominations.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally like it's a massive treat. So
where do you? Well, I thought you were going to say it's a massive tree. Like, where do you start? Like, where do you land on the tree of Christianity?
That for sure. I mean, like, well, Unitarians, obviously, I have an affinity to, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They're keeping it old school.
The in between waters. Yeah, yeah. I love how truly diverse this space is. It's so much fun. It's like, Solomon and Solomon and all of his temptations and all of his glory. It's that.
Well,
yeah.
Solomon has temptations. I mean, like Solomon, his mistake was it was TLC too early. I mean, like as Solomon's wisdom at his point, you could ask, because people are saying, "Whoa, Solomon, Egyptians, all these women, they're bringing in all this crazy stuff. What's going on over here?" Now Solomon, he's already playing like 4D chess. He's like, guys, they're all orienting towards the one. So like, yeah, she calls it Ra, he calls it this. I'm all good.
Even before the prophecies that everything is going to lead back to Jerusalem, even before those prophecies.
Well, yeah, I would be convinced he's aware of that already. I mean, there is a story how Jethro is worshiping every type of idol worship.
Mm-hmm.
That's because, in a certain sense, he was aware that there's something unified behind it. But he's like, I don't know which one it is. I'm going to do it all ultimately.
It's like Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager in Jewish terms.
Exactly, right, exactly. Yeah. So there's a whole story how he has a staff. He has Abraham's staff made it down to him through the concubines' wives. They made it down to the Kenites, and he has a staff and it's planted in his garden, and no one could remove it. And he says, whoever could remove it gets to marry my daughter. This is the first like King Arthur story.
That's sword in a stone. That's exactly that.
And Moses comes. And he grabs the name, but he could recognize the tetragrammaton's written on it, and he could recognize that, and he takes it out, and then Jethro knows like this was the one we were waiting for. So I don't know, did that go down? I can't tell you about that, but the point being that I think we're always trying to go back to that source. The difference is both Enoch and Noah, who their names are also similar, both required God to walk before them or to the side of them, and they required still intervention. When it comes to Abraham, he's running in front of God. He's not waiting to be called. He's running out to try to manifest these things early on already. And while it's true that he only introduces himself to Abraham under the name of El Shaddai, and later on to Moses under the Tetragrammaton, that is also a hint to us that we are constantly being revealed more and more and more and more. You have to assume the relationship we have now with God is not something that Abraham would comprehend necessarily.
Yeah. It's like a unveiling that only occurs through time.
However, while in a certain sense it's more rich and maybe abstract, because it's so abstract, it's a lot less embodied. During the first temple, while prophecy was prevalent in the air, and this is also why we still had to deal with such forces like idol worship, because they were palpable. No one is walking around being like, what is in the world to come? And what's like, that wasn't concerning them. God was present. Like, I mow my lawn and I go to the temple for pilgrimage once every 3 years, and they weren't having like philosophical conversations at the time. And today we get to play around with these ideas in a certain sense, but we don't necessarily feel him around us everywhere. By the way, I want to be sensitive to your time. I know you got to bounce in.
Yeah, I've got to go in a few minutes. I think I think before, and you could open it up to other people. Maybe I could stick around for a few minutes for those other people. But I think there are two topics I'd love to talk to you more, Hezi. But I would definitely love to talk to you more
Yeah, we're a
at
little
your
all over the place
convenience.
right now, but it's
And
fine.
I'm a very patient guy. I sometimes I come across as like spontaneous and unpredictable, but like I actually am pretty patient and gentle. I just try to be light about it. So one is Jung. I'd love to dive into Jung with you. I know far more about Jung than I know Freud, but I've read a lot of Jung. Another is I don't know if you know about this, but I think in the last decade or two, there's been a tremendous amount of scholarship in Christianity at better understanding Jesus's Jewish roots.
Father
And
Stephen DeYoung, I'm
the
saying he's
Yeah, so I'm about 2/3 of the way through this book,
yeah.
but Jesus and the Jewish roots of the Eucharist. But it's a pretty remarkable book. It talks about the bread of the presence and makes connections all the way back to Moses. And anyway, but and it might be something that you're not interested in talking about.
Well,
But like
I'm
but I and you know, like your knowledge of Jewish tradition and history is like, I'm sure 100-fold greater than mine. But I'm curious about some of the aspects of this book that I could bring up and see what your thoughts are. And maybe I could take notes on that and send them to you ahead of time or something like that. But anyway, those are just two possible topics that floated in my consciousness congress, let's say.
I would love to. I'm just realizing now that there was all these comments that I missed before.
Oh,
Now,
my bad.
now
I wasn't looking either.
now I let them. So, anyways, if I missed, I'm sorry about that. But I think I put in a link. Yeah. So first of all, we could definitely discuss. And yes, I would be glad to discuss those topics. I would also recommend discussing those with Jacob. He is also a treasure trove of knowledge. Just be warned, coming
Coming with my full suit of armor, the Knight of Faith. We were just talking about
No, really listen. I'm tremendously grateful for it, and listen, he calls out things he thinks are nonsense.
Yeah,
it's fine, and maybe my attitude
calls it as he is,
right, exactly as he sees it.
Yeah.
However, having said that, if we're in a reality where there's two groups calling themselves Israel, obviously that's a conflict, and we have to recognize that. And that doesn't mean that we have to split. We have to recognize that we're both trees being nurtured by two trees being nurtured by a single water source. Mm-hmm. And I think the deeper we dig down, the more we'll find out about ourselves as Jews, and the more Christians will find out about themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. I think that's true about Islam as well. We have to be brave about doing that. And Jews potentially need to realize where they need to maybe open up, and Christians have to realize where they, Maimonides, what made Maimonides, so tremendous. One of the reasons why he's called the Great Eagle is he comes and says, accept truth from he who says it. Right? It doesn't matter if it's Aristotle or the Jews. Like, it's just we're
the truth is the truth is the truth. Yes,
exactly. Truth, and that's what we're searching for. So there's definitely, and the relationship between Christians and Jews, no one would have ever imagined it would have been where it is today 500 years ago. And that also gives me a tremendous amount of hope to our relationship with my Muslim brothers. That also there too, we could all come together under the tent of Abraham eventually. And I believe, I truly and honestly believe that we will go there. But while in this space there is room to have a very honest conversation, and this is not a condemnation of Muslims. This is more of a reality. We have to realize that they're not ready at that level of a conversation yet.
Well, one thing that gives me hope, Hezi, is that what we're doing here is far more interesting than apologetics. And I'm going to say objectively interesting. It's just far more interesting. I'm learning. I've already, like, argument for heaven's sake. I love that. I'd never heard that before. Wouldn't have learned that without this conversation. The 70 faces of the Torah. I can learn, I genuinely love learning interesting things from interesting people. And that is a far more fruitful exercise than any sort of apologetics or any sort of my way's right, your way's wrong. It's just boring. it's like, I realize people die along the way. You're killing people in the name of boredom. It's kind of stupid, but anyway, so this is far more interesting, and the world is a far more interesting place in sort of, let's say, the estuary model of, let's see, let's put your ideas to the test, let's have fun and compete and cooperate simultaneously in a nice sports game. But at least for us Christians, and I think it's for the Jewish people also, I think it's still nested in that spirit of love. And yeah, so, and or that spirit of, yeah, you can call it whatever you want, but God's righteousness,
Love.
justice. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
I like to see us all as path makers.
mhm.
And this is the kind of conversation where it starts becoming biblical or prophetic in a certain sense, which is like, the language of God and the knowledge of God being, going across all the lands and being aware everywhere. And I feel like this is how that conversation starts happening. It doesn't happen with one day everyone's waking up, they're like, oh, geez, I guess the Christians are right, or I guess the Jews are correct. And I would say, it in a certain sense, it also maybe requires, right? It requires suddenly, if Luther required the printing press, the printing press, so it could be that TLC required YouTube, required a conversation where like this could actually manifest in this sense. And I'll just add that in this space, this is not something I was looking to do. It sort of happened, and it was too strange for me not to see it, or at least try to read into it as an opportunity. But or like I work with the Noahide community. I don't know if you're aware of it, but that is something that was recent. Sorry,
I've heard of it, but I know almost nothing about it.
So the 7 laws of Noah, in a nutshell, we could discuss more, but basically Judaism offers all the nations of the world, all the people in the world, all could keep the 7 laws, which it really ends up being, according to different opinions, that number is much greater. There's other things you could take on, but it's either way, it's a growing community, a little north than like 100,000 right now, but slowly and surely people around the world are sort of taking note. And even in Jacob's little corner, we have a little Noahide corner. So I teach like their own Noahide halacha and Noahide prayer book. And that is, in a certain sense, it becomes interesting because there are, again, different opinions in Judaism, which look at Islam and look at Christianity and already categorize it as Noahide. Others don't, but that now allows me to have a completely different relationship suddenly with a Christian, which is like
interesting.
This is no longer like idol worship problem tension.
It's like a Jewish estuary almost. No?
Well, it's, I mean, it's
like an in-between
secular
space?
Judaism, but it's,
okay. Yeah.
I mean, you're part of the club. You're in it. It's your God. You could pray to him. You could talk to him. Now, if you want to take out more, you could start taking on more. There's opinions that go all the way out to saying like if he wants to keep the Shabbat, then he's welcome to keep the Shabbat if he wants to as well.
Yeah.
But it is a growing conversation and a community, which in a certain sense also sheds light on our interaction with other faith religions, because the interest is, and obviously I'm biased over here, but the attitude ultimately is that Judaism, in a sense, is offering to the other world religions. Mm-hmm. There's a beautiful culture in Christianity, and there's a beautiful a culture in Islam. And if you would allow me to, in a certain sense, open up your theological suitcase and say, okay, these 7 things are fantastic, keep it up. These 2 things are not relevant. That's no bueno. And these 4 things, let's tweak it. And that's it. But now, if you still need to use the concept of Mary, now that in according to, let's say, in my eyes, let's say cleaned it up a little, then great. Then keep on using Mary. And like, that's the term you're going to, like, I don't need you to now look like me. So the Noahide from Bangladesh is going to express himself differently than the Noahide in the Philippines. And in a certain sense, that is also unity through diversity. And that is a correction to also the Tower of Babel, where you're supposed to see, It's not. We're not supposed to be unified. Yes,
It's the
but
mosaic vision of Luke Thompson. The
right.
mosaic
Yes,
vision
yes.
of
It is a
I
mosaic vision of Luke
it's
Thompson.
it's really cool. I typically call him Tom Lukeson just to infuriate him from time to
I like
time.
that.
But no, I unfortunately I have to depart. It's my wife's birthday today, so we're having a
Happy
special
birthday.
late lunch, and yeah, I'll wish her thank you. And but it was a pleasure talking to you, Hezi, and I hope we do this again. And
Indeed, definitely.
yeah. I
So
really
I'll catch you on the flip side.
thank you. Bye.
Anyone welcome to join. I'll stay on for a few more minutes. If not, all good. No pressure. Plenty of work to do. CW, good to see you, buddy. Yeah, unfortunately, I hear that. No, that's not what he meant. Neutrino, good to see you too. Who else over here? Christ brings a sword. Hello, sir. You are your own worst enemy when you deny your savior. I guess the chat is ignored. No, not ignored. I get it was ignored, but not purposely. Okay, Plevis, good to see you, brother. Matthew, hello, sir. Hope you're doing well. An ark for sons making theological jujitsu and play during the flood is a great image. Indeed. Benjamin Franklin likes Neal. I like Neal as well. Christ brings a sword. What else you got for me over here? Two sides of the coin. Sign for Israel will appear on April 8th with the eclipse and the arrival of the comet, which signifies the Antichrist kingdom coming to earth. All right. Okay. Intense stuff going on over here. The sign of Jonah will be witnessed by the world on April 8th. 40 days later, there will be the destruction. Question to Christ brings a sword. If that doesn't happen, what are your thoughts about that? Upcycle, hello, good to see you. Fantastic conversation you had. Now that you've shown your face, please God, you'll join us on streams more often. But generally speaking, it was a fascinating conversation to hear. And kudos to you on the perseverance of not running around. Reminded me of Forrest Gump. And Dolly, yeah, it's good to see you too. It's always nice to see you. I think I hit up all the. I think my wife is smiling at me. I think I hit up all the comments over here. If it doesn't happen, I will wait longer. Okay. That's true. We got to be patient. Well, we got to be patient, or we need to orient ourselves properly, and then, of course, if we all orient ourselves properly, we'll be doing well. 15 minutes back, I had a talk with my theological hero this morning. I saw Daniel Jordan Wood. You guys were schmoozing and talking. That's very nice. Luke, you're also welcome to join on, even though I know we're gonna have our own talk. I could still talk for a little, 20 minutes if you want to join on. There are 7 cities in the USA named Nineveh, and all 7 will have a total eclipse on April 8th. Nineveh. Nineveh is a beautiful example how God, just because we read the story of Jonah on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the 10th of that month, which in Islam used to be Ashura, the 10th, but they now moved to a different date. Either way, we read the story of Jonah, and what's interesting is Jonah goes to Nineveh, and Nineveh are not Jews. However, God wants the redemption of all people, right? That is always a possibility to repent. We're not looking for salvation, we are looking for redemption. Okay. And Joppa. I think you mean Jaffa. It would be two F's, and it's actually Yafo. So the way it's pronounced is Yafo. Or maybe you mean something else. Joppa. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Wait, Luke, are you joining? You jumping on or no? I wonder if the outcome of redemption and salvation are connected together somehow. They are. I'm not running away, Benjamin Franklin. Next stream. Hit me on that if you're there. Salvation. Well, again, in Christianity, obviously, there's looking to be saved. We're not looking to be saved. We could repent. We could all repent. Interestingly, also, that even to Nineveh, we're never being told the prophets are almost never condemning the other nations of the world to worship God. It's just act properly, but there is never a demand for a monotheistic view. That is more of a mission statement when we say "Hear, O Israel," when we cite the Shema, something that eventually will happen. And obviously, thanks to Christianity and Islam, both acting as path makers, quoting Maimonides over here, that was done. I would even say, I'm trying to say this without trying to sound offensive, so no one take offense, obviously. But in this week, we talk about in this weekly portion, in the portion of Truma of it's a gifting when we build the tabernacle. So the outer skins of the tabernacle are made of the skins of the tachash. There are different interpretations what this tachash is. There's a fascinating Talmud that talks about it being a unicorn that was never seen before. Some people say it's this kind of lemur. Some people say that, and connecting to that unicorn story that we're talking about, a narwhal whale that has like this leopard skin and has a horn, and it's almost never in that space. So that's why maybe when the Talmud says it was never seen again because it was so rare. Either way, Rabbi Cook gives an interpretation that the skins, the outer skin, is Christianity and Islam, and they are manifestations of Judaism in a certain sense to the world. And there's a question with regards. The rabbis talk about: is this tachash? Is this animal? Is it a domesticated animal or is it a wild animal? And if it's a wild animal, then in a certain sense, looking at Christianity and Islam as wild animals that there's no control over, and we're sort of not interested in having a relationship, or is it a domesticated animal, and by that sense, it is something that we want to have a relationship with, and while we do not have the power yet to interpret it or what God has planned, nevertheless, we see it as an outer coating of Judaism that is being spread out to the world, and it is something that we shouldn't ignore, rather see how we could cultivate a relationship with it, of course. But again, that's an out there idea. Some notes over here. Okay, again, Christ brings a sword. Jupiter, the eclipse. All right, I'm excited for the eclipse. Okay. After Nineveh is born again, then Jonah suffers. Yeah. Okay. The Palestine Socialist Son, the United Nations. All right. All right. Wow. You equate Christians with Muslims. No, I don't equate them together. There's obviously differences. And in Jewish and different Jewish authorities and rabbis also look at them differently as well. But we're all children of God, obviously. And in that triangle, the geometry, there's obviously different relationships. Obviously, Islam recognizes Jesus. We don't. There's the monotheism that we have to play around with, obviously. But don't take any offense to that, brother. It's all good. I meant it as just as far as two other religions promulgating the word of God. Okay. I'm going to give this 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to bounce. Watch the end of America happen, and then who will you have to help you? Who, you mean like Israel? Come on, man. With the eternal people. Babylonians are gone, and the Assyrians are gone, and the Romans are gone, and the Germans are gone. So I'm not concerned. We had a 2,000-year exile. We will be okay. It definitely helps. It could even be a hindrance. Obviously, America's involvement in the current situation in Israel has its pros and cons. But I don't fear if Pax Americana disappears. Obviously, it'd be horrible what happens to the world, but Mystical Order of Yisrael. The Rambam thought the same about Islam and Christianity in the Guide to the Perplexed. Yes, he mentions it in the Guide to the Perplexed. He also talks about it in chapter 10 or 11 of Kings and Their Wars in his Mishnah Torah. Redemption, CIA, Ultra Classic, Creation, Regained. All right, CW, with your magical wisdom, I stand corrected. Yes, Israel will survive. Only the children. I hope my children survive. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Read, Zach, and see if it looks like the present day. They talk about the prophecies. First of all, you have to be very, very careful talking about looking into the prophecies and reading into, the what's happening around us. Having said that, Israel being in the center again and the world power, so it definitely feels biblical in scale. I've spoken about this in the past. There is the great, whatever. I don't want to say what verses I think this relates to, just because I think it's too soon. I hope God keeps on smiling upon us, and I hope we could very soon have the end of all unnecessary death or necessary death. It's horrible. Losing Palestinians, losing Israelis, horrible, horrible. The neutron bomb. All right. To be fair, Christ brings a sword. I definitely don't look at the Bible as a science book. I don't think it sees itself as a science book either. So Benjamin Franklin is really amazing that it prevails, I think, because they adopted written stories. Although we're still using more inferior oral information transfer tech. It is amazing that this identity prevails. And that's why I talk about an operating system, and one that I'm still eager to tweak and update if I want it to prevail for another many, many, many more years and centuries. To be fair, though, what John Vervaeke's working on and his little Silk Road, and in a certain sense, what I believe the Noahide community could offer is a pair of Torah Oculus that everyone could put on and partake in this proper orientation. Judaism doesn't claim to be better. It's just the arrowhead pointing, but it requires all the other components of the arrow to fly straight, and we require the other 12 tribes. Whether you want to look at that as genetically, regionally, or from a more symbolic sense, we all have to unite. They will melt before they hit the ground, means attached to the radiation. The modern state fits the Quran 99. Such a reading Rashi's commentary on it. There's the death. There's the eulogy in Jerusalem. The mothers are crying. A lot going on. Mystical order of Israel. The radiation is the Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a theory that it's still that the Ark is in Ethiopia. That's where it made it, and all the people that guard the Ark in Ethiopia or in Africa, wherever it is right now, they apparently all the people that guard it eventually lose their vision due to the radiation that's over there. I'm just playing around with you, of course. Maybe it's in the River Tiber. Who knows where it is? The children of Israel are the apple of God's eye, and they'll be protected, but the adults are doomed. How do you define child? Who's an adult? Is it over 13? We're all God's children at the end of the day. The Bible calls the Bible as science book as an assumption. It is nourishes from the Bible. All right, CW. I'll show another treasure trove of information. Sorry, you mean 14:2 and 14. You will not be forgiven. Never make a mistake again. Jeremiah hid the ark. Ooh. There's a Talmud talks about how there is this priest walking through the corridors of the temple, and then he saw one of the stones was raised and a light glowing through it. And he attempted to touch it or adjust it, and he recognized that that's where the ark was, and then it disappeared again, never to be found. There were archaeologists that I could be wrong about this, but they were digging under the Temple Mount, and through not LiDAR technology, but some other technology they had at the time, they saw caverns, and they saw some sort of things shaped in the shape of the ark, but they had to stop digging because the Arabs came storming down, and it was a whole political thing. But who knows? Who knows what secrets await? A theory exists that the ark is under the location of the crucifixion. All right. Feel free to ignore my didactic. I'm enjoying it. You're here. I'm not ignoring them. The world could see them. We love you. Yes, it's behind Jeremiah's. Okay, all right. We'll see. Maybe Jeremiah pulled it off. That'll be nice. Claimed to have touched it. All right. We know. Well, we are told what happened to people that touched it before. It doesn't work well out. It doesn't work out well for Uzzah. It doesn't work out well for him. That is an appropriate response unless and until we chat more directly. I believe, CW, we cross paths. It had to be a Jacob's channel, and we chatted a little. I'm a very big fan of the way you speak. I was about to do like an impersonation of it, but I love how you speak. I love how you sound. It's very cool. Where is the Gemara about the Cohen and the Ark? 1 second. Is it in Gittin? Yes. It's been a while. I like last year. I did a lot of these just open-ended streams. These are fun. I do have to do work though, but these are fun. Got it. Okay, nice. It is in the Tractate of Shkalim, 6th chapter, 1st Mishnah. You got it, brother? Right, it says there are 4 angels guarding it. All right, well, then now we have to bring in the angel conversation. So that's a whole other, is it Azrael? Is it Raphael? Is it Gabriel? Is it Metatron? Is it Zagzael? Like 2 ships in the night. Yeah, well, I'll see you. And like at least like we're not missing each other completely. I'm hearing your horn. I'm seeing your lights. They've taken out the 10 Commandments. This guy's claiming a lot of stuff, this Ron. I don't know about that. Someday, please God. Along with a videotape that shows the activities sitting next to the 10 Commandments. All right. Well, Christ brings a sword. It looks like this Ron guy has it all figured out. He's welcome to bring it over to us here. We'd love to examine it. Someone shows truth. I don't know what he's saying. I mean, there's different. How does he say the tablets look? Are they rectangle, the way the Talmud discusses it? Are they actually etched from both sides? Are the shards there? Is the little jar of the manna bread over there? There's versions that it's actually made out of it's like a sapphire blue cylinder hollowed in from the inside. Which one did he see? Between Trinitarianism and Unitarianism boils down to whether it's possible the Father has free will apart from his programmed desires. Does he have a choice? Of course, he has a choice. You're saying, does God have a limited choice in this retracted space? But I would say yes. Of course, God has free will. Yes. Toda Habibi, you got it, man. An attempt was made to remove it, and a number of priests were killed in the attempt. Ron says he went in to retrieve their bodies. All right, listen, Ron. You gotta trust Ron. All right. Okay, we had fun. We'll play around. No one's jumping on. Oh, it's so fun. It's fun to interact with you guys. Guys, look at this guy. This guy Ron. He's discovering it all. Discovered Noah's Ark in the mountains of Ararat, called Doomsday Mountain. And today, visit the center. You can go and see it. Right, this is in Turkey. There's discussions about this. The World War, the Second World War or First World War. The photographers and the planes, they took pictures. They saw it hanging out of the rock. Very, very interesting. Ancient technologies, the Anunnaki, who was it, where'd they go? So much to discuss. The aliens, the Nephilim. I'm just giving you a hard time. Christ brings a sword. My point is, like, these conversations, they go all over the place. The sea of reeds. He found where it happened, and it was scientific. The right wind came, and it opened it up. Fascinating, fascinating world we live in. The truth is unbelievable. Yeah, we live in an amazing, amazing world. You didn't hear me say, I didn't call you a liar, shedding love. Hope you're feeling that this is a place where you could express yourself and your ideas are being taken as seriously as they can be. Anyone watching is welcome to go into my channel and take a look at this week's weekly portion video I sent out. Dali, hey, shalom, hello. Can you share what you know about what shalom means? Well, in modern Hebrew, it means like hello or goodbye. But generally speaking, shalom means, and also from the word shalem, complete. But it's not just peace like a handshake. It's more of unity, elements completing each other, working together with each other. There's a synthesis between them in a certain sense. It's an ideal status. It's quite war. I mean, again, we use the term peace today, meaning like working together, or like an art, like a let's use a sad but relevant example. Peace with the Palestinians wouldn't be a ceasefire. Peace with the Palestinians would be us recognizing our counterparts and recognizing how ultimately we complete each other in a certain sense, in proper orientation towards the maker. And then that would make its way all the way down through, like, we found peace with each other, so we allow ourselves to find peace within our families, within our nation, within our economy. Shalom. And then shalom, perfect peace. What does that mean? I hope I answered your question now. The ground over the head of Jonah is the rapture that is coming. That will only last. Okay. The eclipse. Okay. Yeah, there was obviously issues with Jonah. Also, he has to deal with that with the little shade he makes himself from the sun. He has the kikayon, the worm, gets it destroyed. Another humbling example for him. Dali, I would also just mention, like, you could explore a little then what would be the difference if you wanted between peace and shalom and truth and emet, both being God's names. And while I was saying peace is a harmony, on the other hand, one can play with the truth, even in a certain sense, to achieve harmony. There is an example of what do you do when we're supposed to say kala na'ah v'chasuda, that this bride is beautiful if you see her. But what if the bride is not beautiful? What if she doesn't look too good? So there are some sages that come and say, well, you have to say the truth. You must say that she is ugly. And others say, no, you come and say that she is beautiful nonetheless. And of course, you can give reasons why she's still beautiful, but the idea is that yes, he could have been speaking the truth, but he was looking to achieve harmony, which is like another level of a truth in a certain sense. The weeds in Jonah's head and the storm. The weeds in Jonah's head are the thorns on Christ's head. Oh, I see the connection you're making there. I am the crimson worm. Is that like a tattoo you have? Just to clarify, Dolly, what I said about truth and lies, as I'm thinking about that, I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that ultimately in a world where there has to be all shalom, you can't also have lies. So there's a limit, obviously. You don't want to create a scenario where there's two lies. The idea is that to achieve a true unification or true harmony, that example of talking about the bride is sort of the type of truth I'm talking about. The worm moon will follow the eclipse. All right. Christ brings a sword. All right, how long are you in this little corner? I've been enjoying your engagement here so far. Do you feel people engage with you in a fair fashion? Do you feel that this is a space that you've managed to express yourself? Do you feel that this is a place where you managed to learn things? Okay, I'm definitely not going to get that done. All right, I'm officially giving up on getting some work done. I'm getting other work done, but it's list work. So if someone wants to jump on, I'm going to be here a few more minutes now. Praise the Lord. Yes, you are doing well. You are non judgmental. I am non judgmental. I don't know. Maybe I am, but currently I'm not. Um, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about how long have you been in this space? Have you interacted with others? I haven't seen you before. Dali, also, if you're there, if you wanted to jump on, you're also, of course, welcome to jump on as well. You have not censored me. This is my first time. Normally, I am censored for my comments. Well, if this is your first time, then there wouldn't be a normally. You mean like on other channels you go on to, and do you feel like you get censored because like you're? Um, now, I'm not judging you. I'm just pointing out a loving comment, right? So you are definitely the predominant person right now commenting right now. And do you feel like you are trying to express a truth? Do you feel like you're trying to uh, uh, right? So I see you do get your views censored all the time. So do you think it's because of your views, or do you think it's the volume of your views? Because this is a space where people are. I am a watchman, a lurker, a watchman. That term wasn't used over here. I mean, the reference reminds me of the comic, the graphic novel, of course, but telling people of the coming judgment. Right, right. And I guess you feel you're compelled to let them know of the truth. Yes, you're obviously going to get some pushback of that. Um, but you got to do you. And currently, right now in the conversation, it's not bothering anything. But you'll have to notice that you're flooding the comment section with this. So no one's going to feel like they're going to be able to engage with you without feeling like we know what to expect from this guy. He's going to be like bombarding us with regards to uh, 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 doom is coming. The watchman in the Bible. Oh, okay. I have to tell you in the world that the judgment is coming. I get rewards for this. All right. And then also, what would that mean? Like you told us right now, or you need to continue telling us until we say what? Until I say like, yes, I agree, because you did it, you won. And right now, 10 people saw this. Ultimately, by the end of I don't know, next week, maybe there'll be like 200 views or 150 views. So you did a good job. Now I know you're saying April 8th. My point is like right now in this stream. Right, I know you're saying you don't have to believe it. So is it saying it once suffice, or every interaction? Like at this point, you could be like, okay, now I gave the message. Now I could express concerns I have, thoughts I have, how my day was. What do I think about Israel? I mean, you don't have to talk about that. My point is like the mission has been done. You let me know April 8th, the eclipse, Nineveh, destruction. And we established already that if it doesn't happen on the 8th, we're going to keep on waiting. So I'm with you. It's going to happen. Rocco, good to see you. Hope all is well. but the whole repent or die thing is kind of important. Yes. I don't know who from Grail Country this is, but because I love Grail Country, welcome. Hello. What's going on? Nothing. I'm doing work. This was a stream with Neal that turned into a just chatting sort of, and it's still available to be a just chatting, but I'm doing work, actually making a list for my employee that came back from the Army Reserves. Thank God he came back healthy and in one piece. And while he was protecting our country, now it's time to work because it's been 4 months and you weren't there. Nate, hello, sir. We still have a conversation to have, by the way, I believe. You had a comment on Facebook. You had a comment. First of all, Grail Country had a stream with Jordan Daniel Wood, and I haven't seen it, but since all the people there are rock stars, I recommend people go see it, like it, subscribe, enjoy, participate, grow, manifest, embody, all the above. But Nate, you had a comment, and what was interesting about it, about your comment? Now I have to go look for it. Sorry. But it was an interesting comment, I think. And it reminded me of something. Eating of the animals before the fall. Was it the animals? No, it wasn't about the animals. What was it about? Ugh, I can't remember. Hey, man.
Did you find the comment yet that you're trying to find?
I'm looking.
Okay.
Do I think that Israel will launch nukes? Man, this guy, this Christ brings a sword. No, I don't think we're going to show. I don't think. I mean, I want to just let you know, this is what my children ask me all the time. Are we going to use the Einstein bombs? I tell them, no, we're not going to use the Einstein bombs. No, please God, we will not have to ever resort to that. Okay, I found the comment right now. Eating animals to know I'm positive not being permitted animals before the fall, and therefore they're not required, but not the animals. The prohibition against meat and milk. Meat and milk. You wrote, while essentially silly and arbitrary, it's actually quite profound on symbolic level. Meat is dead flesh. Milk sustains newborn and fragile life. So that's what I wanted to hit up on.
Okay.
In the Noahide class, when I was talking about, we were actually going over the laws of shchita, slaughtering animals, and we had different levels of the discussion of like, is this worthy or not, or either way. I did mention about the prohibition between mixing and milk and meat, that there is a sense that rabbis do talk about how it is a mix of, and this relates to the Kabbalistic sphirot of chesed and din, and justice. And meat is din, which is justice, which is ultimately it's you're killing an animal at the end, you're taking a life, and milk is chesed, which is being pious or showing grace, which is milk sustaining life. And the attitude is that if you mix these two together, it's a reminder for us to recognize how we shouldn't blur the lines between these completely, and we could get into trouble if we blur these lines, and rather have to recognize how they at sometimes need to be separate. So it was in line with some of your thinking.
Yeah.
Do you know, and we don't have to dive into this, are you aware of this Imam Mahdi?
No. Tell me about it.
So the Imam Mahdi is again, this is he's not mentioned in the Quran, but he's like in different like canonical texts, basically,
Okay.
like of like the Hadith. And this is a person who basically is seen as like a savior in the Muslim tradition, but he's connected to the 12 tribes, which is also relates to the coming of the Messiah in Jewish literature is needed. And this Imam Mahdi is also named Israel and comes from a Jewish lineage. But there's also, he comes together with Jesus. So it's just a very interesting character. And I don't think explored enough. And I want to explore a little more and see how this cross references.
Does this relate at all to like any of like Korban's writing about the hidden Imam? Is that the same?
I think
because Korban actually connects. He actually connects the stories of the hidden Imam with the Grail cycle. He actually thinks that they're intuitions of the same. He doesn't think that they influenced each other. He's perfectly willing to accept that they developed in completely different parts of the world under completely different traditions, but he thinks that they're perceptions of the same revelation.
So I just typed it in quickly. It looks like it is this hidden Imam.
Okay. Yeah.
The reason.
So I lied. I do know a little bit. Yeah.
The reason it came to my radar is I have this friend of mine, Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, and he is neck deep in the Lost Tribes world.
Okay.
And he has been working like with the Afghan people and the Pashtun tribe, and he has these fascinating stories. But and he's an Orthodox rabbi, but he's been coming to me recently and been talking to me about this figure and how like we got it all wrong. We shouldn't even be fighting. Like really, like this sort of clears everything up. I was like, okay, I gotta see what we're talking about over here. But and I'm more eager to spend some time looking into this right now because.
Well, Hezi, I mean, this is definitely something worth exploring. It's funny because, like, literally last night at last night's dinner conversation, I was actually talking about like the way in which a lot of the things that I'm into, like in terms of like sophiology, you have like at the same place and time, like essentially like mainly in Southern Europe, at the same time, you have this flowering of the Marian devotions in Catholicism and Kabbalah in Judaism and the Grail cycle. Like they're all developing at the same time. And I think that they are all intuitions of the divine feminine. Like they are all that's the connecting point. And
Shekhinah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. And so I think that is like this is kind of like the
Silk Road.
If you the Silk not just more than the Silk Road. It's like it's the kind of like it is that which is still being revealed. Right? It's not it's about it's not about the revelation that we've already been given, which we have from scripture, right? That's been given, that's revealed. And of course, in a way that revelation is ongoing because our understanding of it is always continually advancing over time. But I think that one of the things that the divine feminine represents is like that which is yet to be revealed.
Well, yet to be revealed, and for example, would you say your work on the Grail country is part of that, like, slowly but surely revealing that?
Yeah, that's, or at least not revealing it, not because you can't, like, because I don't think you can, like, that's the thing about the divine feminine is always in control of its own veiling and unveiling, right? And so we just glimpse it in moments of unveiling, but to at least like make people conscious of its presence, I would say.
Yeah, so Luke and I were talking about this. Well, not really talking about this. We were just texting about this a little about unveiling, and sort of it, like the Kabbalists, the Mekubalim, basically would expose expose a little, and by exposing a little, they're really basically like hiding 7 more layers, and then really exposing a little, and it's sort of a game that one has to be played. And once you recognize you don't know, you then only realize that you could sort of dive in deeper. So there's definitely that sense which resonates with me. I would also mention that there are indications where, when talking about the study of the Talmud and the study of, let's say, the legal system, which has been prevalent for the last 2,000 years of exile, so to speak, and definitely after the destruction, after the whole spiritual world really gets condensed into the 4 cubits of halacha, and while that maintained us, that is seen as either the great band-aid of exile, or it is seen as the small element, while the large element, and this is, I'm using terms that are talked about in the Talmud, the large element, or the main thing to study, is actually, at that time they call it the story of creation and the story of the chariot, which is physics and metaphysics, and or earlier iterations of, let's say, the Kabbalistic teachings. But there's a sense where once this wisdom was reintroduced, and in a certain sense, we are told that these interpretations of the text is how the prophets were interpreting the text in a certain sense, which is, this is the language they were using, right? So if they read this verse, yes, there's different levels to it. And yes, there's also what we learn, what we derive from, like, now I'm going to not, wear this linen anymore. Having said that, there's another deep interpretation, which is how the prophets were seeing it. And this is what we would say is the Kabbalah. So we are told, according to, let's say, well, at least some of the sages, where now that we have returned to our land, which I'm sure Jacob Federici will disagree with, and this is his channel, and this is his StreamYard, so I'm going to say right now, Jacob has opposed Zionism, and they're all silly people. So now that that's out there, I would say that that language, and the fact that now the fact that my son in synagogue today was reading a comic, right? It's a 3-volume comic, and it is a cartoon version of the holy mystical book called the Tanya. And my son studies, and there is the hero, the child of the book, and he has this little buffalo, and the little buffalo is there to represent the animalistic version of the soul. And then there is the constant adventures he goes in on, and he has to deal with that buffalo that's always with him, and himself trying to constantly connect his divine portion and move on. But the sense that my son is learning this right now, and these were the secrets of the secrets that the rabbis were teaching at the time, shows us how far we have come in a certain sense. And the idea is, if my son could be integrated in these concepts, maybe his son will then be playing with a different version of the Torah, one where is a lot more familiar for your son to be speaking with my son with as well. And that's a much more unified and hopefully a pure speech that they could be having in the future.
That's really great. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a funny thing. First of all, I sent you a potential new subscriber last night. What my wife had some people from her synagogue over for dinner last night, and it was really weird because I didn't know until we started having conversation and talking. But there were 2 couples, 4 people, and three of them were born Christian. They were born into Christian households. Right now,
I want to make sure I understand the confusion. This is people coming from the synagogue, but all the people coming from the synagogue, as in all the Jews, were all born Christian.
Correct. 3 out of one of them was raised with no religious upbringing at all.
Yeah.
The other 3 were raised Christian. And one was Baptist, And I think they all discovered that they had Jewish ancestry was part of like their process that led them to the like. And I don't remember specifically the story for the woman who was raised Baptist. I don't remember her story, but the one that I do remember is like one of the women, actually the one who was interested in checking out your channel, because she actually does like religious education. And I told her about the little short videos you do on the weekly portion, and she was very interested in checking those out just as a resource for her religious education. And she discovered she was actually born in or I know she was born in New Mexico or actually in Mexico, but she's of Mexican heritage, and she ended up finding out that originally her family was Sephardic.
Yep.
And so she had Sephardic heritage, and so that's what kind of led her on her journey to convert. So
The real Jews.
yeah. So so yeah, that was like very interesting because it's like I was the only Christian at the table.
I was gonna say those are good numbers for my team right now.
Yeah, good numbers for your team. Yeah. So, but it's like, but you know, that's the thing though, is it's like, you know, I was listening to in the conversation, and it's like, well, like none of them were ever like Christian in the way that I am Christian, right? So they all were raised within a certain like kind of like, you know, typical like kind of North American framework of Christianity. And so I think like part of the reason, I think like other than the fact that they found out that they had like this is actually their heritage, right? So that's a big attractor, especially if you find the tradition that you've been raised in to be unsatisfying, and then you also find out that you have this wonderful heritage that you didn't know anything about, then it makes sense that when you find that out and then you discover that there's so much richness in this heritage that you've discovered compared to a relatively impoverished version of Christianity that you've inherited in your context, it makes total sense. That's the direction that they would go. So,
I mean, it's sometimes like it's false advertisement in a certain sense, because when I'm talking to people like in Israel about Christians, there's a certain sense of like, oh, the Christians, I got to keep like my distance and like, you know, and I would say like, you know, this little corner is not indicative of like, you know, Christianity like out there in the world. And that's why it's very interesting because, and I think this, maybe Paul has mentioned this once in the past, but all these characters, definitely all the Christian characters in this little corner, they go back to church constantly, right? You guys all leave this little world of the little corner and then you go into church and you're having conversations with the people next to you. So like slowly but surely, the people around you are going to be like, who are these strange Christians that have like, you know, completely different ideas? And that's why I think ultimately, as we dig and look, I think we're slowly but surely starting to, expose more and more and more of the picture, to all of us, and ideally we will converge.
You know, my priest was in the chat today, though, for my live stream. You know, so it's like, I guess I'm like, I understand like other like I understand like Sam's struggles and Luke's struggles, but as like for whatever reason it's like as like kind of like non-standard and non-representative as I might be, I managed to keep myself from getting into too much hot water. I don't know what to tell you. So,
well, do you? I'm saying, are you like? Well, let's say, and I'm just using him because he's made it public. But like Sam Tiedemann clearly has been in hot water, right? He said goodbye to some churches. Have you like? Do you get challenged by your pastor?
My priest and I are like have largely. Hey, it's Luke.
I'm telling you, join, come.
Yeah, come on in, Luke. Yeah. So my priest and I have like fairly compatible view. Like actually, so I had no idea what to make. I didn't know what our new priest was going to be like, and then he actually showed up to one of our estuary meetings, and it's like he's like ends up like name dropping a bunch of people that I also read and am influenced by. So I think that he was raised Baptist, and he ended up becoming Anglican. So there's a way in which like our trajectories are not. We both came out of a fundamentalism, right, and rejected that. So we're both not fundamentalist in our thinking. So even though we might not necessarily agree about everything, we have a certain sort of like common like non-fundamentalist approach that allows us to have space for disagreement about things that are maybe less consequential.
How old is he?
He's younger than me. He's in his mid-30s.
He's probably talking to his priest friends. He's like, I got just the dopest church right now. You guys have yet to marry. And one of his friends for sure got stuck with like some sort of like, like a Paul Vanderklay. Everyone's this old group, and he's like, oh, this guy, they won't stop. And you given this beautiful estuary, he's sitting down. You guys are all having like the highest level conversation. Oh, I'm so excited for your pastor.
Oh, he really loves the estuary. He actually, one of his friends was visiting from Hawaii a while back, and he introduced me to his friend, and he's telling him all about estuary, and he says but he introduces the conversation by saying Nate has a very important ministry, and then he goes on to tell him about estuary. So his like first framing was to refer to estuary as a ministry. So,
Luke,
Hey,
you made it.
I did. I wasn't able to catch up with everything of you and Neal's conversation, but then I just opened up YouTube and saw Nate in here, and I was just like, what is this? Just a live streaming all day thing.
You've been doing great with your live
yeah, you have. You've been doing such a great job with the live streams. I appreciate it, Luke.
May I ask, Luke?
Yeah.
Because there was a time, I guess a few months ago, where you took like a step back.
Yeah.
And a noticeable step back. So was that like, and now clearly a lot like, like significantly putting in time, hours, clocking in, which also is evident to creating that schedule also allows people to sort of expect that. And there's motion over there. So what's the difference? Why like the recluse to hyperactivity?
Well, I don't know. Part of that could be, I don't even remember why. Are you talking about like with Boxer or just?
I guess so, but I think that was also YouTube though. I think there was like sort of like a lot less comments, and you'll indulge me for one more second, which, it could also be the fact that in the last month, there's been like, and I was talking about this with Neal, sort of like a lot of new faces joined, new channels joined, like there was like sort of new blood and movement again with the TLC, and maybe this was also the prime time to just like jump back in and like restart stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a very I'm a very fly by the seat of my pants, chaos monster type person, and so it's part of it is probably relational aspects with my family and busyness and things, and so I'm really at the to some degree, I'm at the mercy of my wife and kids because, I essentially have 3 teenage kids that are just pretty busy with their own things and lifestyles right now, and their own schedules and activities, and so that's part of it. Also, part of it is it's just a balance a little bit with my wife that I think we're coming to. There's just been ups and downs with that, and she's at a place I think where she very much understands that this is something that I don't know, value and or need to some degree. It's something that's very healthy to me, and so she is graciously kind of allowing me to have that space. There's it's just part of the relational dynamic that you have with any relationship. You know, it's just like how much can you insist on your own way in sort of any relationship? And so she's just allowing me to have a little bit more space for that. I'm very, I guess I've always kind of used technology this way. This is like what Twitter has been for me. I don't know why I'm jumping back in more now, but it's like, it's the way I do my live streams, and it's the way I've used YouTube. Is the exact same way I used to use Twitter. It's half a diary, a way for me to externally process things that I'm thinking about. And YouTube is much more interactive in that you can, but it's also very relational. Like PVK has been huge on this lately in the videos that he's been doing. I don't know. I'm kind of a believer, and it feels a little culty that whatever the TLC is, I do think is kind of the Telos of YouTube. And like PVK's new members only video that he just put out yesterday, I think, is talking about YouTubers quitting and the algorithm and trying to make money and how it just became really unsatisfactory. But what TLC is, the true community building that's not merely about ideas, and it's not about ideology. It's really about relationships, which I think is actually, a quick aside, I think it's a lot of the confusing aspects that like our detractors would have, like even this morning in the live stream, the T-Grogs or the Anselmans or whatever. I'm like, you guys don't get what this is. This isn't like a exclusivist thought group.
I want to ask you about that, Luke, because here's the interesting thing to me is like, so T-Grog and Anselman, they both keep coming back.
Right.
Over and over and over again. Like,
right.
very reliably. Like, they're both...
I was just going to say that they, I feel like they want in, but it seems like to get in is like, oh, but I need like to buy into like all of this. And the answer is like, first of all, you don't.
Right.
Like, and in a certain sense, to T-Krog, it's a question. You're like, why are you here? He's like, well, you guys are nice people. And he's like, you're right. We're nice people. So like, I think they're interested in this kind of conversation. I don't know if they know how to, and maybe not all of us, like to pinpoint or label what exactly is happening over here. But they are seeing participation, love, understanding, patience, and for some people, I definitely don't see that. I definitely don't see that in debates. I don't see that on the news. I'm not seeing that with my kids. I'm not seeing that in work. So like when I'm seeing that for the first time, this is like that elusive thing people talk about, like, oh, like a nice, loving conversation. And it's diverse. And it's different, and it's been going on for like hours. Wow. And I think like the lurkers are just like watching that, being like, look at that. That's actually happening. It's happening in real life. And I think it's very intriguing for people.
Yeah, that's actually why I opened the stream today with that section from Meditations on the Tarot, Letter 11, where Tom Berg actually talks about like what the power of conversation is and how it's different from controversy and polemic.
Right. We're just, because I think people just don't, because you guys, I mean, you two are like in as much of my inner ring as you could be. And I mean, Nate and I, whatever. Like, if you wanted to make it about ideology, Nate and I, we match up quite a bit on quite a few things.
We do.
But yeah, we've also had some pretty impassioned disagreements about things over the time. I've never had, like, I don't care at all that you're Jewish. Like, I just don't care at all. It doesn't bother me at all. It actually endears you to me. And so, like, that's something I think Phlebas misunderstands all the time. I'm trying to highlight his comments over here. But, like, Phlebas, I think he'll often say, or like Anselman would say, or no, MJ will say, like, the new confessionalism will be this conversationalism. And I'm like, you guys don't get it. Like, I'm not going to be kicking you guys out. Like, it's just not what I'm going to be doing. I'm not looking for everybody to agree with me. That's not what this is about.
Well, that's in a certain sense. I also think some people jump on because there's a sense where like I recognize this pattern, like this is where people disagree with me, and then like I get pushed out. But like that also doesn't happen over here. And I think some people are taken back by that as well, like, which is, why isn't the pushback turning into like the next level of drama, which is, it just doesn't necessarily have to turn into
you're
that.
talking like disagreement for clicks.
Yeah, just people want to be in that. like, and he could still be over here. This Christ brings a sword, right? So this guy was
Yeah.
like hammering on stuff over here, like Jonah, the eclipse is happening, the worms, and like I'm just like playing with him, and I'm saying like in the eclipse, it's coming, it's going, like you're in a good place, and I'm just going to these comments. He's like, I told you, it's happening. It's happening April 8th.
Yeah.
What's happening April 8th?
I thought you were going to be talking about Wesley, but this is a different cat. Maybe they got
This is some other guy. I
Yeah.
need to be telling people the judgment is coming. I'm a watchman in the Bible. These are important things. The point was, I asked him, I'm like, he's like, this is a good place. I'm like, well, have you been here before? No. He's like, I usually get censored. I'm like, well, you get censored because like, I'm like, you notice like you've been like hammering pretty hard about like this. I'm also Jewish. And the idea is that like, no one's going to kick you out right now. So like you could drop that and then now we could just talk and you could breathe.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is some degree though where, because like Wesley is this guy who's been popping into my live streams or on Grail Country or my channel, and he just a lot of all caps, just spamming things about prophecies and different dates and judgments and whatever. You know, he's like the internet version of the guy on the corner saying like the end is near. And and I'll definitely mute you for a while because that's part of the dynamic of that would maybe be the heresy if you insisted on it long enough in TLC, is just like, if you are coming in here to only grandstand and insist on your own way and you just keep saying the same things over and over and over and you're not making any space to listen or to engage in a conversation, like if you can't read the room, you come into a conversation, you're not reading the room, and you're just like, you keep hammering your same points, well then this is not for you. Like that's not what we're doing, you know.
Again, that's
go ahead, Nate. Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, and PVK like always is such a good example on this score because I think we've all been following long enough that we can see the evolution in Paul himself. Like Paul now is not the same as Paul 3 years ago.
No.
Not at all. Like, I don't think Paul 3 years ago would have penned the comment that I shared from Chris Green. Like, that comment from Chris Green's Substack that I read on the live stream today, he penned that. I put that in his comments on the Ken Lowry, Jordan Hall conversation that he had on his live stream yesterday. He penned that comment with those exact remarks. So,
I mean, the upcycle conversation to me was one of the most intriguing ones in the last few weeks, just because I would say there you see, I mean, we're all adults, but like this guy is a cognitive scientist sitting down and like for the last because I've never seen him before. So for the last X years, the guy's just basically been taking notes, sitting down, writing notes. So this was, you know, there's a difference, and I'm saying this like with love. Like if I have like Andrew or Trey wanting to comment right now about what's happening, but they're like living their life. He's surfing, he's doing this until like now I'm having like, I hear this. That's like the real world in a certain sense interacting when I hear like upcycle interact. And then he gives like this whole breakdown of how he sees the TLCs being used. So it's quite fascinating to then see it grow into something. And this, I bring this back to Luke. I would say that your current Grail Country run is, and maybe you'll disagree because I wasn't there, but you've mentioned in the past having conversations on Discord, and there was very lively conversations going on in the Discord and the chats. Like, do you feel though that what you're doing now in the Grail Country is more structured? There's more of a direction to it, or like, no, there was like great conversation happening 3 years ago, and this is the same kind of conversation, or this has evolved, this is more developed. Are you more developed?
Yeah, I think I think we all have. Like this is kind of the idea of the dojo, and like I tell like the new wave of people coming in. I think that I'm over the last whatever, I don't know, 5 years or whatever, I'm a lot, I don't know. It's hard to know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? I think I'm a lot better at talking about the things that I want to talk about and people understanding it. I don't know how much of it is that I've improved talking about it or that we've just all been in constant dialogue for 5 years. And so, but I don't know, Grail country thing, is it better or different? I don't know. The thing that I most enjoy, and a lot of it's connected to talking about ideas, but it's very free flowing. I like relational, intellectual hospitality. If I had to say something that I think that I'm good at is modeling an environment um, where it's very welcoming and inclusive to people to be able to talk about what they're really thinking. That's what I want. I mean, that's what I want more than anything, is to talk to people in a way where, in as much integrity as they have in the moment, wherever they can. I want to constantly be pushing everyone, including myself, further into a more integrated articulation of who you are in your own particular way.
Well, you definitely have inspired me with what you've been doing. Like the having like an actual academic like dropped into the middle of a rando's live stream. That's a new thing. Like that's like
Who's this? Jordan?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Stephen DeYoung has dropped in on Jacob's streams before, so it's not unprecedented.
Yeah.
I would say, and I mentioned this to Neal, that and I believe the TLC has this or tries to champion this way of thinking, which is Maimonides says, accept the truth from he who says it. Right? It doesn't matter if it's Aristotle, and it doesn't matter. It just I'm accepting the truth once I recognize it.
Yeah.
And so I would say for Stephen DeYoung, you could be like, the guy's a heavy hitter. Why is he going on? He's like, this guy's just, I'm interested in what he's saying right now. So Jordan Daniel Wood, if he's jumping on right now and he's talking to Luke Thompson about his Mosaic Vision, the idea is because like I'm just interested in talking to where I could find truth. So and if this corner, at the very least, if it continues practicing a space, participating in cultivating a space where truth can be ascertained, or at the very least, like it has room for it to sort of to flourish or grow, then of course you're going to have academics interested in this because this is the real.
Yeah, right. Hezi and I, this is part of like watching what Luke was doing, and then having academics that I've been talking to like over time, like continually say to me, like, after we're done recording, like how awesome this was and how different it is from the conversations that they typically have in academia, and how much they enjoyed it and how much they would love to come back, and getting all that positive feedback. It's just like, I don't know why it took me this long. I suppose that I had to like build up enough good faith in order to be able to do it. But to me, like, this seems like the natural next phase is like, okay, now let's drop these same academics into conversations with real folks with real questions, and let's see what happens.
Luke mentioned this in the past with Sam, Sam, where like Sam was talking to some academic and Sam was like throwing at him like some points, and the guy's like, "Oh, I didn't think about that," and he's like, "Oh, right," and this guy, this is just regular Sam, right? This is not a guy that's
well, Sam's not that regular, but yes.
Yeah. And I mentioned this in the past also about Yosef, which is like Yosef's not like a regular dude that just walks around like little Encyclopedia Brown was just like, oh, I know all the stats and all the stuff, and like he's again like a marvel. But I do think that. I spoke about this once with Zebi from Seekers of Unity, where he's not academically trained. And there was a question. He's like, should I go the academic route? And the answer is, you've far surpassed what they're doing there.
Yes. Yeah, and here's why. But Hezi, the thing that I was talking about today on this stream, like this. It's because of it's because academia has become so focused on polemic. It's like I'm going to respond to and debate my critics. So there's no room, and there's very little room in the academic world for the kind of synthesis that will actually lead to higher knowledge and higher understanding, because it's set up as an intellectual agon. It's a contest to prove like who's the smartest, essentially. And it's also causes it to become disconnected from the embodied reality of most people. So this is actually like dropping academics into these kinds of conversations is actually like it's a good thing, like on multiple levels.
Right, and this of course relates to the conversation that Luke was having, Jacob was also having about trusting. Um, what was the term they were using? Credentials, right? They were
Yeah.
talking about credentials, and right. So like with Zevi specifically, I was like, your channel at the time, is any one of your videos is more than you're ever going to get like in a whole semester worth of like what are you talking about? Like it doesn't make any sense. You have you could reach anyone you want. You could talk to the top people in the field, and I really believe that slowly but surely that's what's going to start happening. And if Tom Holland, Daniel Jordan Wood, if they're participating over here and they're saying this is where the conversation is happening, then of course this is where it should continue. And it is a question at what point does this little corner, right now you have Paul Vanderklay is part of the little corner, and he spoke to Jordan Peterson, so like there's like that sort of connection.
Right.
Like, what does that really mean? Now,
Right.
if Ian McGilchrist and all these people start interacting, then that's something else. Then you've sort of reached a new level, and that doesn't mean every single person in the little corner needs to be talking to Jordan Peterson. Rather, it means that and it's not that anyone's looking for recognition. It would just be a testament to something that was built naturally, organically, ground up, that has proven to be a place where this kind of conversation, or the new times, the new town square, so to speak, of these kind of ideas. So I
think ultimately, from like what I would hope to see is that it just like it causes a recognition that starts to have academics like within their own world communicate differently. Like, I don't think the point isn't necessarily to be having academics talk to randos forever. I don't think that's not the goal. The goal is to get academics to consider a wider field of possibilities.
Yeah, but it's right. So let's pretend an academic like Jordan Dalewood plays around in this world, and then in next year in one of his papers he drops mosaic vision, right?
Right.
And the idea would be is that idea, and it could be that it already has been tweaked or changed since Luke said it for the first time. But the concept was that idea, that meme has managed to permeate, grow, and make sense, where like now it could be adapted and quote unquote taken out to the real world. And you have that sort of cross pollination that's happening. Now, in a certain sense, we, and I say this as all of us being religious folk over here, our pastors, our priests, and even the classic interpretations of our text have got to a certain point where we're like, okay, I need more. I need more information. I need deeper levels of understanding. Maybe I need to understand that there's things that need to be connected. Maybe I need to be exposed to works that I've never seen before. Right.
Well, because yes, absolutely, and that's like, what was it? I think it was like Kale Zeldin had a tweet the other day about like whether we were living through an apocalypse, and I said yes, we are, because the modern world has, in fact, it's already collapsed. It's not collapsing; it has already collapsed, and we're living in a chaotic time where whatever is going to succeed modernity is still being formed. So we're in this time of this time of uncertainty, and it's an apocalypse in the sense of an end in that it's an end of the world, but it's also an apocalypse in the sense of there is a new revelation coming. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, so I also have that sense. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, my involvement in the little corner, my involvement with the no high groups is my response to I don't know. I need to charge my theological, my spiritual tanks, and I need to make sure that my arsenal and my toolkit are all that I'm prepared, because and this is something again we were talking about with Neal, like just the changes in the world, both political, geopolitical, technological. It just seems so great where it would seem almost reckless to just be sitting and just watching Jersey Shore and just thinking like hopefully everything's going to be okay.
Right.
Rather, like I need to re-engage my text, and it's while I was very thankful for the again the utility belt I have with my current traditions, it almost feels like they might not be enough anymore, or they need to be updated,
Right.
or yeah.
So like okay, so let's say we have a disclosure event. Well, where we find out that like whether they be ultra terrestrials, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever. If it turns out that in fact that we share this cosmos with other intelligent beings,
Yeah.
are our traditions prepared for that, or do we need to like dig deeper in order to prepare ourselves for that?
I've done my homework on that end. Like my tradition could play around with that. Like there's different versions of how like that doesn't necessarily like disturb me. But yeah, I mean,
And I feel the same way about my tradition too. But I tell you what though, there are a lot of people who are within like my same broader tradition, who within their little corner of the tradition, the corner of the tradition would certainly collapse.
well, my biggest fear. I mean, there's obviously the institutional collapsing, but and you'll excuse me if you heard this before. My biggest fear is that the personalities the relationships between families will get affected, and between people will get affected in a sense where, in a Jewish sense, if I'm arguing with my son about electricity on Shabbat, and it gets to a level where like I'm yelling at him because like you can't do this and he did this, and then next week the aliens come and they're like, "Go, guess what? Now you can use it." I'm like, "But I yelled at him. Like I was invoking God. God was mad at you. You can't do this." And guess what? That's not what was meant. And like if it was 100 years ago, like Judaism changes and now we could eat this milk, you'd be like, well, these families that had these fights 100 years ago, they're all gone now, so they don't know better. My son's gonna be able to look back and be like, remember last Tuesday when you said like this was no way could you do this, and now you're saying you can? Like, what happened to that whole talk? What happened to that whole like?
Yeah.
So, it like we have generations. I mean, think about this in Israel. You're gonna have people voting, people losing money. We're not going to send money to this group. We're going to send it to this group because now Israel has to figure out how to deal with electricity on Shabbat for the whole country, because there's a predominant political group that is ultra Orthodox. If in 2 weeks from now that reality changes, so the reason we didn't send all the money to like the blind and we moved it over here, that's because we were misinterpreted. Like there's grave ramifications to this. And I don't think people, relationships, I think psychologically we're not ready for these things. So again, and like I was telling Neal, that talking to you guys specifically and also in the little corner, I think allows us all to, in a certain sense, again, religiously re-triangulate ourselves in this moving world. And if 1,000 years ago that was happening in certain echo chambers, like where are you going to find this? Is sort of like the Library of Alexandria, where you're going to find like a Luke and a Chezi and a Jacob and a Paul all having a conversation. Like the last time that library has been burnt down, where someone could turn around and get like all those texts in front of them, and people were playing around with those ideas. Or like you were saying, Nate, where the Sufis and the Christians and the Kabbalists are all hanging out at the same watering, at the same well, so to speak, and discussing. But that was sort of stamped down for a very long time due to wars.
It still is, Hezi. It still garners suspicion within each of the traditions. Like within each of the, well, actually, maybe I think Judaism is a little bit like Kabbalah is more accepted within Judaism than, let's say, like the more mystical elements of Christianity are accepted within broader Christianity, and the way Sufi mysticism is viewed by broader Islam. I think Judaism is like a little bit more accepting of it, and I don't know why that is exactly, but there certainly is, like, the culture still looks down on it.
Well, it's associated with woo, right?
Yeah.
So like, obviously, and it's associated with, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You also have to shave off all those traditions. You have to shave off the layer of the nonsense. You have to shave off the layer of them trying to, like, playing with, like, incorrect math.
Right,
so
right.
There's stuff over there which is like, this is like nonsense, and it's hard for people to do that. It's very, very much intertwined in Judaism. Obviously, there was a while back where there was a big push out against it, and there was a long time where it's still being seen as something that you have to study with caution and care, and only from a certain age are you really allowed to take on these kind of things. But the reason that is because it's sort of, if you're reading it once you're 40 years old, you already had a wife and a family, so to speak. You're already locked into the community. So once you recognize that, like, the things you're learning really flip everything you knew on its head.
That's right. And here's the thing, Hezi, because I think there's a way in which this kind of stuff that we're talking about, I don't think that there's ever gonna, I don't know, well, maybe at some point in the future, like you were talking about with, like, like with when you're talking about what might be in the future for your son, maybe at some point in the future. But I would say, like, right now and for most of history, as I see it, it's definitely not for everybody. Like, you remember there was that conversation that Paul played part of with that evangelical guy who was talking about, like, how Sunday church just doesn't work at a certain point in a person's spiritual development.
Okay.
And so the wisdom in that approach of, like, waiting to expose people to things like that when they're mature and they're embedded in the tradition is that it's because you're reserving it for the people who really need it, to maintain and it's specifically so that they maintain their connection to the community. Like, that's why, because they're the kinds of people that need that moreness in order to be able to feel connected to it. But a lot of people won't ever need it.
So, and Luke, I want you to jump in after this. You obviously don't have to, but so in Israel, or at least in Judaism, there's a sense where we were waiting so long, and we were playing so long, like, with exile, where, again, we developed our spiritual world left us after the destruction of the temple, and after prophecy left us, and we retract into the 4 cubits of halakha. And there's some elements of spiritualism over there, but that's very much becomes Judaism and the system. The study hall, the book, that's where I interpret. And there's secrets, there's hints. You study only the story of the chariot with one other person. He can't teach you, you can't teach him. And the attitude is, you need to keep the ball rolling, right? And we need to have this system, these locks. It's going to keep us away from other people. We're not going to intermarriage. We just got to keep the flame alive. And there's a sense where now, coming back to our country, and I see it on the ground, where I don't want to be selling to the secular Israelis or the people that are seemingly interested and thirsty for sweet honey Torah. They don't want to hear about it's 40 minutes and it can't be this ox and it can't be that thing. They want to be smacked in the face by the divine. And there is a language like that, which we forgot for a very long time.
Yeah.
Then we cultivated, then we kept secret. And there's a sense where now, in today's day and age, that is the Torah they should be learning. Now, not in willful abandon, just throwing it out there. But like I was saying, mentioning to Neal, my son is now reading a book, right? And it's the book of, it's a cartoon version of the holy mystical book, the Tanya. And it talks about how, there's the character, he has like this buffalo next to him, and that represents his animalistic soul. And there's a whole journey he goes through. And the idea is that he's going to grow up already with these concepts built in. And it's, if I grew up with little books where Moses, first of all, looks like he has like white skin, right? And he has a skull cap, but that obviously didn't happen. And you can't see their face because like they're holy people, but like we don't need to do that anymore. Our kids are developed into a deeper understanding of what the relationship is. And now the comic book, can I share something with you guys for 1 second? Can I just
Absolutely.
Just free riffing.
So, Adam, first of all, it's once Cain leaves, he's feeling bad that he killed someone, his brother. It talks about sort of then like human history evolving. So they did it smart in a sense where like they're showing evolvement like through a cave. And it's like a wink to the fact that like, you could see biology and evolution happening together. Like is growing together, but specifically we have to deal with Abraham. And Abraham is trying to figure out as a child what's going on with his life and his relationship with God. And I wanted to give this to my kids. So this is Abraham trying to recognize his relationship with God. And this is after the Midrash that he was looking at the sun, he was looking at the moon, and eventually he realizes. So this face is how they show the interaction he has with God. And in all of the books over here, that's the interaction with God. And that's not a hand coming out from the sky. It's not a man with a white beard. It is a lot more, I think, real and showing what the interaction is for my son to recognize talking to the Almighty is something that's happening within. And it's not, and it took so long to get to this, to get to that kind of book in our history. And the fact that like we're there right now, to me, I'm a lot more hopeful because that's a conversation which ultimately also knows how to deal with even concepts like my sons realize that, what Christianity is, what Islam is, what these things mean, and not to be scared of these things, but more see this as part of God's tapestry. So I think the mystical language is actually very much needed because I think that does open up many, many doors and allows people to feel, I think, a lot more welcome into these worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. What that reminds me of is Jordan said in the live stream this morning that Christianity, but you could say the same thing for Judaism or for any religion for that matter, is young. And if you think of like
Carl Jung,
no, it's just young as in age.
Young
Like
age, okay.
Yeah, because we don't know how long into the future it extends, so therefore we don't.
Gotcha.
Right.
Like imagine, Christianity, whatever's, depending on how you frame it, 2,000 years old, but imagine it gets to be, Jordan said 6,000, or 60,000, or 6 million years old. I think this is where I would say, especially among the intellectual class, and this is what a little bit led to my deconstruction, but not loss of faith and evolution, where I moved in Christianity, is that I just call it what you will. I guess it's kind of the same beef that I had when I made that video to people, to religious conservatives and irreligious conservatives, is that if you are so worried about boundary policing and trying to understand or control systematically and systemically control people's understanding of God and box it in, especially in its infancy, it's to the point of everything you were just laying out. Like you have no idea where this is going to go. You really don't. Like if you really believe that God is infinite and infinitely profound, and there's infinite amounts to learn about him, like with what you think you know right now, no matter how old your tradition is, you're wanting to box that in and close it in and create a bunch of walls. What the fuck do you know? Like you don't have a clue. And I think what's nice about mysticism is that it's not like some sort of straw man postmodern, arbitrary relativism where like it doesn't matter and it's all woo and we can just make shit up. Like it's tied within all these different realms and traditions, whether it's Kabbalah or whether it's Sufism or whether it's mystical Christianity, it's tied to a tradition. You're not going to understand it apart from that tradition because initiation is part of how you understand anything.
Correct.
But it leaves open the possibility for revelation and intellectual repentance. Otherwise, you're just going to constantly find yourself in this kind of rosy glassed restorationist, like the best times are always behind us thing, and like fearful of the future.
This is why I think in the final analysis, Tradition and Apocalypse might be David Bentley Hart's most important book. And I think the concepts of Tradition and Apocalypse actually can be applied to any religious tradition's understanding of itself. I think that maybe some other traditions have a better intuitive sense of what David's saying in that book already, and that Christianity is more prone to not understand tradition in that way. But his idea of tradition in that book as being fundamentally tied to its telos, to what is being called to become, and for it basically to be impossible to like fix it to any point in its past.
It's because it's a living tradition.
Exactly, because it's a living tradition. I think it's a fundamentally insightful thing. It's like if I were to say like I'm not a big fan of a whole I'm not, as you know, I'm not a big fan of confessions, and I think the 39 articles of religion are stupid within my own tradition. But I think the one thing within the Anglican tradition that I think is actually really good is this insane assertion that it is both Catholic and Reformed. Because that insistence on referring to itself as both Catholic and Reformed is an intuition, is a movement toward understanding tradition in the way that David is talking about in Tradition and Apocalypse. Because if you say you're Catholic and Reformed, you are acknowledging the fact in the Reformed portion of that in fact you are always coming to understand what your tradition is.
It's divine simplicity and process theism. That's Catholic and Reformed. Yeah. Well, and it seems like to me that Judaism has always been that. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure.
Yes, like I said, other traditions have already had a sense of this.
Right. So built in, you have like we always say the 70 facets of of the Torah, right? So you always have like a back door to be like, well, I could accept this version or this version or this version or this version, and we call it Etz Chaim Hilim Achazikim Ba, which means it's a living tree to those who hold on to it.
Yeah,
good. It is constantly growing and living, and it's evolving. My critique towards rabbis in Orthodoxy is that has become stagnant in a certain sense, which it's almost has become tradition, has become like the new God, which is like this is
right.
Like
but
why
the same, but
frozen? You got it's like it's like you are now turning into a wilting, dying tree at this point. And it's always, I understand there's a slippery slope. I didn't ask you to burn Torah scrolls or just just take it seriously and recognize that these things have to evolve. You can't constantly wait for, and I'll take a step back. There's a certain sense which the rabbis wait for, which is a mechanism they could use, which is go out to the field and see how the community is acting, which is there's a certain sense where a rabbi could say, okay, really, it makes sense to make this change. but I could only make it once I see that on the ground, the people themselves are ready for it, or the people want this right now. And sometimes the rabbi himself, thinks it's not ready for me to do this yet, but I was wrong, because it seems like on the ground, people are ready for this kind of change. And then I have to sort of work with them. I'm not protecting God at that point from them. At that point, I'm limiting what they need. And that's not Aaron saying okay to the Israelites and building the golden calf. Rather, Aaron, and there's a critique in a certain sense with Moses towards Aaron, which is, you could have rerouted them. Like, you should have recognized what the tension was, what it is that was making them nervous, and tried to then reroute it. And not, I understand you're saying I tried to ask for gold and this just happened. Then you will mismanage the situation. You should have recognized the tension that was there, and maybe we could have had a different outcome over here. So here to the rabbis, if the sense was just like, I need a safeguard, a specific period of time where like we made a decision, then that's
I gotta go, guys. It was been awesome. Chezi, we gotta talk soon.
I'm gonna and Luke, you and I also have to have our conversation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna end this right now anyways also. Is that all right?
Yeah. Absolutely,
but Luke,
buddy.
second, before you jump off, hey man,
Hey.
what's going on?
Oh man, it's things are going well. I enjoy this a lot. I don't yeah, we need to have a bigger conversation about it. I don't know what it is, because like I was just messaging with some local friends today, and they were saying, hey, I want to get together with you and process through some things. And I'm just like, I just find myself, life is busy with my family, like I said, but then really if I have free time, I kind of want to spend it here. And then that becomes like I guess that becomes a little bit of, I'm doing Estuary Local, and I'm still, I'm involved in my church. I'm doing things with that. I'm doing a local book club. That's a little bit of MJ, that biblical Unitarian cat. His criticism of this TLC is kind of like a cult thing, not to start off a big new conversation. But he's like, I think you guys he essentially takes TLC as like a coping mechanism for a lack of embodiment.
I hear that, but then there's also like, I don't know, like I feel like I'm super embodied. Like, I don't know, I do like 1,000 stuff throughout the day. Maybe there are some people that are using it in this sense. And I heard Grimm talk about this sometimes, a division about like people in TLC that are married to people that are not married in TLC. Because like, you could sing and dance to me about embodiment, but like I made 3 people. Like, I'm like, it's embodied. Like, I'm doing it. So I think there's a difference over there. I don't know. I'm not taking offense to it, but I disagree with like obviously everything could end up turning into some sort of cult thing, and maybe there are similar elements, but I don't know. Like, it's difficult to me to have cults when like one's a Christian and one's a Jew. Yeah. It's hard to like think what they're locking down.
But, it wouldn't be some sort of like ideological cult. I don't know. And it's just, I guess not to make this go on too long, but it's good to see you. We should schedule a time to talk. Because even like, so talking today with Jordan was fun. Like, this is the thing with academics. I like academics. I find him to be, especially academics that I think don't lose the forest for the trees. Like, they don't get so caught up in their myopia and intellectualism and academic rigor that they don't see outside of that. Like, Jordan's one of those guys that I think, oh, you're highly technical, but like, you get it. Like, you understand all the technical stuff in light of the bigger thing, the unity that's behind it all. Because he's like,
what do you think he thinks
of TLC? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, but I also hear my daughter just cried.
Oh,
we're gonna catch this up.
Yeah, just shut her down. All right, see you, buddy. Peace.
Bye, guys.